Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling the meeting back to order. We've been recessed since last night, and Council, you have received on your desk a confidential report, and as you will know from reading it, first off, let me be sure that you've all had a chance to read it. So this has a certain amount of time urgency to it, so I would like to suggest that we need to make sure we deal with this tonight. And for that reason, I wonder if maybe we should just have a short little pause. I'd like to propose that we deal with this first, but I want to give you a chance to read it. So I don't think we need to. It's a pretty simple yes or no. And the appropriate motion is in the material before you. And so with the public's indulgence, we're going to have a 5 or 6 minute further recess here, and then we will begin the meeting proper. Okay, I'm calling the meeting back to order. Thank you for the recess. We need to do a couple of housekeeping things. The first thing we need to do is we need to allow, well, first I need to explain that what we're dealing with is a confidential report entitled Update and Instructions re Glen Abbey, subject to solicitor-client privilege. And because it concerns Glen Abbey, I'll now recognize Councillor Lapworth to see if he has a conflict to declare.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I need to maintain my declaration of pecuniary interest as one of my tax clients is an employee of Club Link. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You can push back from the table. The other thing we need to do is we need to recognize that the attendance has changed since last night. We have regrets from Councillor Giddings, and Councillor Hutchins has joined us, so Ward 3 continues to be represented at the table. And now the chair will recognize Councillor Elgar for a motion with respect to this item.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I would so move the staff recommendation we have before us at this point. I'd ask for a recorded vote.
Okay, the recommendation is that the town solicitor be instructed as set out in the confidential report of the legal department dated October 10th, 2017. A recorded vote is always used on any request, and therefore to be recorded in favor of the recommendation, please rise to be named. Councillor Lischina, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Hutchins, Councillor Chisholm, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, Councillor O'Meara, and Mayor Burton. I declare the recommendation carried. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to turn to the first public hearing item. This is a public meeting report on the town-initiated official plan amendment for the Bronte Village Growth Area Review. And if you, so if you turn your attention to staff, they're going to summarize this report that council's read for the benefit of the public so that those viewing at home will know what the heck we're doing. And we'll turn first to Diane Jones.
And this is not on. Oh, there it is. I just wanted to take a few minutes to provide a brief overview of the background to the Main Street Growth Area Review. These items are found as item 12, Bronte Village Growth Area Review, item 13, Kerr Village Growth Area Review, and item 14, the Downtown Oakville Growth Area Review. As everyone is aware, the Livable Oakville Plan is the town's existing official plan that applies to the lands south of Dundas and north of Highway 407, providing a land use framework to guide development to the year 2031. The plan was adopted by Council in 2009 and approved by the Ontario Municipal Board in 2011. The Livable Oakville Plan was the result of a comprehensive planning exercise, which included an extensive public engagement and technical review process, leading to the policies that guide growth and development. So why review the policies? Since the approval of the Livable Oakville Plan in 2011, many provincial documents have been updated, including the Provincial Policy Statement and the Provincial Growth Plan, which requires municipalities to begin planning for future growth to 2041. In May 2015, Council launched the town's official plan. Oops, I forgot to go up. Here we go. In May 2015, Council launched the town's official plan review, and a review of the Main Street areas were identified to commence. There was specific reference for Bronte Village to commence prior to other projects. The Main Street reviews were to assess if and how development within the Main Street growth areas were meeting the objectives of the Livable Oakville Plan, including the right type and mix of uses, heights, and densities to enable redevelopment. This diagram illustrates the official plan review work program. With respect to the Main Street growth areas, we can see the steps that we have taken and where we are in the process. Forming the foundation of the Livable Oakville Plan is the town's urban structure, providing the overall context for where and how growth in the town will be directed. Within the urban structure, the Main Street areas are identified as nodes and Main Street areas which are planned to accommodate additional growth. The Main Street areas are planned to develop as mixed-use areas with viable main streets and a variety of housing options. Each area is recognized for having a distinct character and are intended to accommodate some new growth and development. However, within the urban structure, they are planned to accommodate lesser amounts of new development compared to other growth nodes, such as our Midtown Oakville. To implement the Main Street growth area reviews, an extensive work program was undertaken for each study. Public engagement and consultation formed a fundamental element to the study process. I now would like to turn it over to Brad Sunderland to provide an update of item 12, the Bronte Village growth area review.
Thank you, Mayor and members of Council. The report for the Bronte Village Growth Area Review can be found on page 157 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of the report is to introduce the proposed official plan amendment that has resulted from the Bronte Village Growth Area Review and study process. No recommendation is being asked to be made tonight, and we continue to seek comments from the public. Over the course of the Bronte Village Growth Area Review, which began in May of 2015, town staff have hosted 3 public open houses, 2 public information sessions, and have attended and hosted several stakeholder meetings with residents associations and the Bronte Business Improvement Area. At each step of the study process, public engagement and consultation was a key component of the review, including input on the draft policy directions, the draft policies, and now the proposed OPA before you today. Following each public engagement event, staff presented the public input heard to the Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee and provided next steps. The subcommittee also heard technical input as part of the study process. One key technical input came from a study commissioned by the town titled Assessment of Redevelopment Viability within the Town of Oakville's Main Street Growth Areas. This study was led by consulting team Enberry Lines Consulting Limited, who were retained by the town to provide an analysis and assessment of redevelopment viability within the town's Main Street growth areas. The results of this technical input have helped inform policy development for the town's Main Street areas, including Bronte Village. Throughout the process, staff have consulted with hundreds of interested stakeholders, residents, businesses, and property owners who have provided their time and ideas. Collectively, a community vision has emerged which builds upon the existing policies for Bronte Village. A draft official plan amendment has been prepared for tonight's meeting, representing a balance of public views and opinion. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity to solicit additional public input on the proposed OPA prior to a recommendation being made by Council. A recommendation by staff is currently targeted for December of this year. Ultimately, the adoption of an OPA will feed into the broader town-wide, provincial, and regional conformity work that will take place as part of the ongoing official plan review process, in coordination with Halton Region's official plan review process. The next slides of the presentation will walk through an overview of the changes as part of the proposed OPA for Bronte Village. So just to give some bearings to the slides here, so the schedule on the left-hand side is the existing schedule in the Livable Oakville plan, and the larger schedule on the right-hand side is the proposed changes to the schedule through this official plan amendment. So the blue outlines show all the areas of change, and the area of discussion for each slide will be outlined in red. So the first change is a boundary adjustment for the growth area. The OPA proposes to adjust the growth area boundary to remove the lands on St. Anne's Court and include these lands within the adjacent stable residential area. The review identified that the building stock on St. Anne's Court represents generally newer built homes on a self-contained cul-de-sac which has a distinct housing form that differs from adjacent houses on East Street within the growth area. In review of this area, there were no identified intensification opportunities on St. Anne's Court. As such, in review of these aspects, staff are of the opinion that removing St. Anne's Court from the growth area is appropriate and would not cause fewer intensification opportunities to be realized. Areas eligible for bonusing. The official plan amendment proposes to extend eligible bonusing areas along Lakeshore Road between Jones Street and East Street as seen on the map. The land use permissions would allow building heights of 2 to 4 stories with an additional 2 stories eligible through bonusing in exchange for a public benefit to a maximum of 6 stories. To enable revitalization in Bronte Village, conditions must be established to ensure it is feasible for redevelopment to take place. The Assessment of Redevelopment Viability Report received by the subcommittee as a study input noted that while the existing 4-story height permissions in Bronte Village can produce feasible financial results for redevelopment, the study indicates that maintaining a 4-story height limit would slow opportunities for growth in Bronte Village and may contribute to unaffordable housing conditions. The viability report goes on to state that permitting development heights of 6 stories is likely to have a significant impact on redevelopment viability and could act as a catalyst to encourage investment in the village. Further, it advances the town's ability to achieve broader provincial policy objectives. Following this assessment, and in an effort of staff to balance the community desire to maintain a revitalized, low-rise Main Street environment, while addressing the economic reality of this vision, the OPA proposes to expand eligible bonusing areas for the consideration of increased height in exchange for a public benefit. Staff note that adding areas eligible for bonusing does not create as-of-right development permissions. To obtain additional height through bonusing, the proponent of a development application must apply for a zoning bylaw amendment demonstrating that the additional height would not create adverse impact. Further, the proponent would be required to enter into an agreement with the town to the satisfaction of council to provide a community benefit to the town in exchange for the additional height. A range of community benefits are identified in the policies for Bronte Village, including things such as enhanced streetscapes, public parking facilities, affordable housing, and parkland improvements. Town Council has the authority and discretion to approve zoning bylaw amendments and to undertake bonusing agreements. The southwest corner of Lakeshore Road and Jones Street. The OPA proposes to change the land use designation at the southwest corner of Lakeshore Road West and Jones Street from Main Street 1 to Main Street 2, eligible for bonusing. Currently, the property located at this corner is subject to 2 different land use designations and policy frameworks. This change would extend the policies that apply to the western portion of the property over the entire property, providing one policy framework to guide change and support comprehensive development. It would permit building heights of 4 to 6 stories, ensuring minimum heights are maintained along Lakeshore Road with the transfer of unused height to an internal building on the site when redevelopment takes place. The Bronte Legion site. The OPA proposes to redesignate the Bronte Legion site from Main Street 1 to Main Street 2, which would allow for building heights of 4 to 6 stories. Through the review, it's staff's opinion that given the Legion's surrounding context containing 3 6-story residential apartment buildings to the east and south of the site, this designation is appropriate and an opportunity to accommodate additional residential intensification. Lakeshore Road and East Street. The OPA proposes to enhance the eastern gateway located at Lakeshore Road West and East Street. The change would provide permissions for increased building heights and bonusing eligibility. The policy change is intended to maintain the existing policy intent for Bronte Village, which is to direct higher residential densities to gateway locations, and this is identified as a gateway location. The specific changes include redesignating the properties on the southeast and southwest quadrants of the intersection from Main Street 1 to Main Street 2. This would allow for building heights of 4 to 6 stories. In addition, bonusing eligibility on these properties would allow for an additional 2 stories on the southwest quadrant of the intersection to a maximum of 8 stories, and an additional 4 stories on the southeast quadrant to a maximum of 10 stories. Once again, bonusing can only be approved through zoning bylaw amendment and a bonusing agreement subject to council's approval. The policies for the northeast quadrant of the intersection remain unchanged from the existing policies in the plan. The arrangement of permitted heights and bonusing eligibility at the eastern gateway respond in part to the surrounding built form and context in the vicinity of Lakeshore Road and East Street, with taller buildings to the south and southeast of the gateway, and low-rise buildings to the north, which transition into the low-rise residential area. So more flexibility for uses. So the official plan amendment proposes to permit additional flexibility for the arrangement of residential uses within and between buildings on properties designated Main Street 1 and Main Street 2. The policy change would allow standalone residential apartments and multiple attached dwellings on properties designated Main Street 1 and Main Street 2 as part of the redevelopment of a property. However, residential uses would not be permitted on the ground floor of buildings which face Lakeshore Road or Bronte Road south of Lakeshore Road, as these roads are intended to be the focus for a commercial Main Street environment. The arrangement of land uses contemplated by the proposed changes can already be seen in several developments along Lakeshore Road West today, such as the mixed-use development at the southwest corner of Lakeshore Road and Nelson Street, which incorporates standalone townhouse dwellings towards the rear of the property. And this is just a 3D image of from Google Maps, thank you Google, for this particular development with the townhouse standalone residential away from Lakeshore Road with the commercial frontage facing Lakeshore. Urban design. The official plan amendment proposes new, revised, and reformatted urban design policies, including a new urban design schedule that works to support and enhance the vision of Bronte Village while promoting unique placemaking opportunities. Policies include direction for the arrangement of uses along identified primary and secondary streets, enhanced streetscapes, pedestrian connections, urban squares, and gateway locations. A built form policy has also been introduced, which furthers the objective to maintain a low-rise Main Street environment, encouraging taller building elements to be stepped back from the street edge, which would lessen the visual presence of taller building elements along the street. This is particular to Lakeshore Road. Further to the official plan amendment, urban design direction specific to Bronte Village is currently being developed by urban design staff for inclusion in the Livable by Design Urban Design Manual. The design document will assist in facilitating desirable and compatible development that responds to the surrounding local context and enhances the character of the area. The design direction will become a key document in implementing the official plan policies and will be applied to all development proposals and public projects in Bronte Village. Appendix C attached to the staff report contains preliminary design direction to achieve desired development in the public realm and on private property. The urban design work continues to evolve and is to be brought forward for council endorsement at a future date. Bronte Harbour and the Parkway Belt. The Livable Oakville Plan encourages the removal of lands from the Parkway Belt West Plan, which is a provincial plan dating back to the 1970s. However, when lands are removed from the Parkway Belt, a land use designation is required in its place. As such, an underlying land use designation is proposed. To visually show an underlying land use designation, the Parkway Belt lands are shown on the revised land use schedule as Parkway Belt Overlay, so another land use designation can be seen underneath. The lands shown as Parkway Belt Overlay continue to be designated Parkway Belt, and the policies of the Parkway Belt West Plan continue to apply until such time that they are removed by the province. The official plan amendment proposes to provide an underlying land use designation on the Bronte Harbour lands as waterfront open space, which would implement an existing policy in the Livable Oakville Plan to designate our harbors as waterfront open space. It's the intent that this change would maintain the ability for the ongoing Bronte Harbour Master Plan to be carried out when that process moves forward. Staff will continue to assess the policies necessary and appropriate to implement recommendations stemming from the master plan process within the waterfront open space designation. North of Lakeshore Road, the official plan amendment proposes to provide an underlying land use designation of natural area within the Bronte Creek River Valley, which are owned by the town and contain walking trails. This designation would permit what is currently present on the site today. The Urban River Valley. As part of the updated Provincial Greenbelt Plan 2017, new urban river valley policies have been introduced. There are now lands within Bronte Village that are subject to the Greenbelt Plan's new Urban River Valley designation. As such, a new policy and mapping overlay has been added, which refers to the authority of the policies of the Greenbelt Plan for the lands subject to the Urban River Valley. The policies of the Greenbelt Urban River Valley only apply to publicly owned lands and do not apply to private property. So on the schedule, it's shown where it applies based on the mapping provided in the Greenbelt Plan, but the policies defer their authority. They're only applicable to lands owned by a public authority, and they are not applicable to privately owned lands. The transitional residential area. The proposed official plan amendment would redesignate several residential properties south of Sovereign Street near East Street from low-density residential to medium-density residential. This change would continue to allow low-density residential uses, being single-detached homes and semi-detached homes, and would also permit townhouses to a maximum density of 50 units per site hectare. This policy implements the existing development concept expressed for this area, which is that it's to function as a transitional area to the residential neighborhood to the north, with where modest intensification is to be encouraged in the form of detached, semi-detached, and townhouse dwellings. The intent of this policy change is to clarify the existing policy framework and provide for these opportunities to take place. With regard to density targets, the official plan amendment proposes to amend the growth target for Bronte Village with a new policy to express growth as a minimum planned density, which is consistent with the language in the new Provincial Growth Plan 2017. Making this change now will position the town for its future conformity exercise to be completed at the end of the overall official plan review process. At this time, the official plan amendment does not set out a numeric figure for a minimum planned density. This number will be established through the town's conformity exercise, which is required to be coordinated with Halton Region's official plan review, which is to be completed by 2022. With regard to the ongoing Lakeshore Road West environmental assessment, the proposed official plan amendment would introduce a new policy to require the EA to consider streetscape design and public realm improvements for Bronte Village to support and enhance pedestrian and cycling activity, transit use, as well as on-street parking opportunities, which complement and contribute to Bronte's character and enhance Lakeshore Road's Main Street setting. Planning staff continue to work with the Engineering and Construction Department on this initiative. And lastly, the official plan amendment proposes a number of housekeeping amendments to ensure consistency in the language and to reflect the additional policy amendments that have been introduced. Throughout the Bronte Village Growth Area Review, a number of other studies have been ongoing within the Bronte Village area, including the Lakeshore Road West EA, the Harbour's Master Plan, and the Cultural Heritage Landscapes for the Bronte Harbour and the Bronte Bluffs. A proposed official plan amendment has been structured in a way that does not preclude these studies from being completed. Depending on the timing of recommendations stemming from these initiatives, further changes may be considered as part of this amendment, or further amendments to the official plan may be required at a future date. So with that, it's the conclusion of the presentation. And the recommendation on the staff report is that comments from the public with respect to the town-initiated official plan amendment to the livable Oakville plan to implement the Bronte Village Growth Area Review be received.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland. Council, do you have questions for Mr. Sutherland? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Sunderland. Back in December of 2013, I tabled a motion, a request for a report under the Livable Oakville Plan review process. And I'll read to you the wording here, and then I'm going to ask you to explain how that was finalized. That staff be requested to report back by February 2014 on which issues raised during the in-zone public consultation initiatives, including the height and density issues raised by the Bronte BIA, will be addressed as part of the official plan review process. Now, that was a long time ago. Are you satisfied, Mr. Sunderland, that you have done everything that that motion requested you to do? And if so, could you just give a brief overview of how you treated that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that request for the request that you put forward was addressed in a staff report in the first quarter of 2014, which identified that we would roll that into our official plan review process. The official plan review was launched in May of 2015, in which that specific item was brought forward, and this study was given a priority status to commence prior to other studies taking place. So this is one of the first studies as part of the official plan review process that is being brought forward to council tonight for your consideration. So yes, I do believe that we are addressing your request through this process here.
On height and density.
Correct, yes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some broader questions that will help me, but maybe some people of the audience as well, in terms of, and I apologize if Councillor Elgar's heart gets going here, but on densities and targets here. It's a good thing we had a CPR refresher this morning. So, and I know that we've done some updates here in terms of, we'll figure out the numbers later when we do our work with the region and et cetera, but maybe if you can just tell us about the relationship between what the province has told us we need to do and what our options are saying, no, we're not doing it, or how we have to show what we're doing. And then secondly, and I guess maybe a little on a larger scale, heights equals units equals people. So how are we deciding now what the units and heights for the people are when we don't know what the people are going to be? And how are we going to marry those two? I mean, if you're off by 10 or 20 or 100, maybe 200, I'm sure we can figure it out. But what if we're off by 1,000? What if we're off by 2,000? I mean, you can't just add a couple extra stories on the top of buildings because we didn't meet what the province told us to meet. So maybe if you can address the theoretical question first about what we are responsible to do that the province has told us, in particular in the Bronte area here. And then secondly, how we're kind of putting the cart before the horse in terms of knowing what we need to do, but deciding what we're doing, and then we'll conform to that after. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So to address the first question with the requirements of the province of municipalities. So the growth plan 2017, it does provide updated growth forecasts to the year 2041 for all of the regional municipalities, including Halton Region. And so the 2041 forecasted population for Halton Region is 1 million people. And so Halton Region is required through their official plan review process to allocate that growth to all of its local municipalities. And so this process is kind of getting ahead where we are determining our own fate and our own future for the development vision that we want to see for Bronte Village, as well as Kerr and downtown and all the other growth areas that we have across the town, where we are directing growth to go. And so that's kind of the process that I hope helps explain some of it. In terms of what if the numbers are off when it comes to the regional conformity exercise and working with the region. So it is my hope through this process that when we establish the vision for Bronte Village, and we will have a good understanding of the types of development that's expected, the density and form and that sort of thing, we're going to have to make some assumptions as to, what unit sizes there will be in this area, and there's a persons per unit calculation that's typically allotted to an apartment unit versus a townhouse unit versus a single detached unit. And through that exercise, we'll be able to kind of come up with a figure for Bronte Village as well as all the other areas. And we'll bring that forward to the region and say this is what we've established as our growth and development vision for the town. That said, all of these processes will be adding additional units from what is currently provided for in the Livable Oakville plan. So we will be showing our kind of forethought in how we can accommodate growth in a reasonable way that is responsive to our urban structure and what we want to see happen in these areas. And then it's a working relationship with the region to come up with their allocation process with all the other municipalities at the table as well. So it will be an iterative process, and through that conformity exercise at the end of the official plan review, there might be additional tweaks here and there that need to take place, but it's our hope that this will form a fairly stable vision for what we want to see.
So if I could maybe, just between you and I and a couple people who are in the room here, if I might summarize, am I understanding correctly whereby if we go ahead with this plan and we allocate units and numbers and people, the hope is that we're demonstrating to the region, listen, we've done our work, we've done our due diligence, this is the number that we can take when the time comes to sort of serve dinner around the table, we can say we're already full, we've had enough, pass it on somewhere else. Is in a weird way, would I be correct in that assumption?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, would you like to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was just going to add, I think it's more than a hope.
Okay.
We have a working relationship with the region, and we've had discussions on how the local planning, which is kind of a bottom-up, as Brad has very well explained, looking at what are the community visions and presenting that up to the region. And we've had a good dialogue with the regional staff to understand how those relationships will happen. So it is more than a hope, it's an expectation from town staff that the region understands what it is we're doing and that collectively we'll come to terms with that provincial conformity, which will reflect the work that we've done to date.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Meara. Councillor Grant?
Just because it's been top of mind lately, and it's probably a question I'm going to be asking with most of these areas, but when we're looking at the streetscapes and redesigning them, what consideration are we giving for cyclists? We've got beautiful, Bronte, an area where a lot of people probably want to go and cycle around. Do we have any areas set aside for them specifically, other than just the trails?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that is part of the process that's ongoing for the Lakeshore Road West EA, where we have identified that cycling infrastructure is a definite necessity for a mixed-use area like this. So as part of that, the streetscape component, I guess, in the public realm, we'd be looking at things not just benches, but cycle rings, bike rings, and that sort of thing, and where they can be accommodated along the streetscape. So that conversation isn't lost through that process, and we're pushing for that.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You'd mentioned cars, you'd mentioned pedestrians, and I didn't hear cyclists in that conversation, so I'm glad that's part of it at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you very much. In your presentation, I noticed you used the words growth targets when you were presenting, and I'm very concerned. The language is very important. And did you mean growth forecasts, or did you mean targets, which are minimums?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the provincial plan, the growth plan, provides growth forecasts, which is a number that they put out there, and they provide that for Halton Region. And what we have to do for our planning is provide for minimum planned densities in our strategic growth areas, in our strategic urban growth center, and so forth. So that is the terminology that's being used that we are recommending to carry forward as minimum planned densities, which would reflect that density level. That ultimately gets reflected into a population number that can be achieved.
Which is intensification.
Correct.
Which is what you're looking for. So we shouldn't use growth targets, right? You would agree? It's a growth forecast on Schedule 3 as for the Places to Grow Act?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it's a growth forecast in the provincial growth plan.
Yes.
And for our intent here, our language would be minimum planned densities.
Perfect. I like that. Can we go back to the Parkway Belt West? My question is, why was that property put into the Parkway Belt West plan?
That is a great, through you, Mr. Mayor, that is a great question. That predates my time here, as this plan was developed in, I think it's 1978. And it has been in the Parkway Belt West plan since that time. I believe the intent of the Parkway Belt West plan was a bit twofold or threefold. Firstly, it was to
Mr.
identify
Sunderland.
infrastructure. Sorry?
Let me help you out of the quicksand you wandered into. Conjecture is never a good response to any councillor's question. The commissioner, I think, needs to handle this question.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. As Brad has said, this is a very old plan. It was put in place in the 70s, and the province determined that this was the appropriate designation here. They have not revisited it since that since that time. What this amendment tries to do is identify from a town perspective what we would like to see as the designations, so that if the province does decide to remove the Parkway Belt, we have in place appropriate designations that we feel are good for the town or important to the town.
Has anyone asked the province to remove these lands from the Parkway Belt West plan at this point in time that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of, we have not made the request, and I'm not aware of anyone else who has made that request. The province has initiated an overall program to look at the Parkway Belt West plan to determine how they want to treat it going forward into the future. So we would expect they themselves are looking at it now.
Okay. So if I look at the existing slide, which is very good here, the green we have is all Parkway Belt, and what we are proposing is having absolutely there is no natural area left in that part. I can't see, I see the natural area, which is a dark speckly green, but I don't see it on the proposed. There's any dark speckly green at all.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the red outlined area is the area that would have the tick marks identified as Parkway Belt overlay on the new schedule. So that area outlined in red reflects the area that's still designated as Parkway Belt West.
Right, yes, I realize that, and it
So-
trumps anything else. Okay.
Yeah, so the area south of Lakeshore Road, the underlying land use designation would be waterfront open space, and that's intended to provide for parks and open space uses, as well as the harbor use that's currently there on the site, as well as a range of commercial uses associated with the harbor facility that's currently in operation today. And the area north of Lakeshore Road, that kind of small finger that goes upwards. The underlying land use designation there is natural area. That is what we're putting forward. And that's to reflect the valley system that Bronte Creek is part of. And that's all currently owned by the town. And it's a passive recreational trail that currently is in that location. So the natural area designation would be a suitable designation to apply to that area should the Parkway Belt West lands be removed from the official plan.
So all you're doing is you're taking the Parkway Belt lands now and putting them into waterfront open space, everything, basically? Am I reading this map correctly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the lands south of Lakeshore Road would go to a waterfront open space designation.
What are you allowed to do on waterfront open space?
So it recognizes the harbor uses that are currently there today, as well as natural features, parks and open space, trails, passive recreation type uses. So a lot of what's currently there today is what would be reflected with this designation.
So no buildings in this area whatsoever?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, that's not the intent of this designation.
I thank you very much for the clarification. Thanks.
Just want to ask a follow-up to that. We have a marine building, a commercial building in there now, and we're recognizing that as a legitimate use.
Yeah, it's legal. It's existing.
Legal and conforming. All right. Good, then we might all be on the same page. I have questions here from Councillor Hutchins, I believe.
Thank you for your presentation. Oakville's goal overall, Bronte, Kerr, downtown, north, south, east, and west, is to have about 2.2 hectares on average per thousand of population. The problem, as I see it in these older neighborhoods, the original parts of Oakville, if you like, is there isn't that much park space available, left over. So my question is, as the density increases, are we just going to accept that the hectares per thousand is going to continue to drop in these higher dense areas? Or are we going to try and do something positive and keep whatever open space is available?
Councillor, is that a question for this presentation?
Well, it's certainly down here. I don't know what other parts of the area could be DC'd or accepted as part of the park space. I mean, I'd like planning and staff to be actively looking for open areas and keep them as park space.
Have you seen anything in this presentation to make you think otherwise?
No, I'm just wanting to ask the question to make sure that they are aware that there are people who are interested in saving and preserving the open spaces that we find in these older parts of the town.
So is there an actual question here?
Well, I'm asking for what are the efforts to maintain the park areas that are already available?
So the matter before us is the Bronte Village growth area. Mm-hmm. Did you see anything in here about taking away any parkland?
No, but I didn't see anything about increasing it either. But the densities are going to be going up over time.
Commissioner, can you help the councillor?
Through you, Mr. Randa, I would also look to Diane Childs, who's been intimately involved, but in any development application, there's a parkland requirement that's either in cash in lieu or in parked space. And in development applications that we've dealt with in this area, we have added additional parkland space. I'll give the example of the Bronte Village Mall, where there was a requirement for a village square, as well as much more accessible open space to thread through there, which is part of the parkland requirement. So the urban design requirements that are done as part of this does look to achieve some of those open space elements, recognizing that this is still a growth area and it is still to accommodate a significant amount of growth. There is the opportunity for the cash in lieu, which would allow us to look for parkland in other locations in the town. So I think it's through the implementation that we continue to look to achieve our master plan requirements for our parkland. And within the more detailed policies, the urban design policies that are outlined in this specific plan, if that assists.
Well, my my suggestion is, rather than taking cash in lieu, is to insist on having the park space, because, as I said, once it's built on and gone, it's gone, and the density increases with time. It never goes down. And the point is that if you're trying to get 2.2 hectares per thousand as an overall average, but it gets more and more squeezed in these older areas, yet they have the highest populations too. So that's what I would recommend.
We're just having trouble understanding what parkland you think is being built on here.
I'm not saying necessarily that there is, in this particular thing, parkland being built on. I want to protect what is there, which is this is achieves. But I also want the planning and staff to understand that rather than taking money in lieu of park space when development occurs, I would prefer to see that they accept parkland and not take the cash.
Thank you, Councillor. For your greater comfort, I'll remind you that Mr. Sunderland pointed out that in bonusing, one of the community benefits that we can accept is additional parkland. So the council is, I think, reassured that staff are providing a tool to increase parkland. Any other questions? Madam Clerk, I understand we have a number of interested delegations. Could you call the first delegation?
First delegation is Catherine Marshall.
Welcome, Ms. Marshall. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I'm wondering if my presentation could be put up. And while he's doing that, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about myself because of the fact that I think I'm eminently qualified to speak today on this topic, which I'm entitling Focusing on Winning Retailing Conditions. I work as a global real estate expert, and I make a living advising large institutional investors all over the world about how they should be investing money for the long term and what the major trends in real estate are. So today we are on the cusp of a seismic revolution in retailing. It's already started in the United States. There are busted malls all over the US of A, and we are going to start seeing more and more obsolete and dysfunctional retail properties all over Canada and here in Oakville, despite the fact that Oakville has always been considered highly under-retailed. So my assumptions in this presentation is that a healthy retail area in Bronte is critical to the health of the overall Bronte area. And the second is that financial analysis of the redevelopment of Bronte has missed what will be true in future, and that is that there's a negative relationship between financial viability of retailing and densities. So I get to the punchline, and I'll repeat it again at the end. I think that this presentation is a rationale to be highly skeptical about the idea that bonusing on the Main Street area of Bronte is actually in the best interests of Bronte or of Oakville. So I said that there's a revolution going on, and in every year that happens, that we see going forward, retailing is going to be less about stuff and more about experiences when you're talking bricks and mortar retailing. The volumes of stuff that are being bought online is just exploding, and particularly in products that would be considered a commodity. And so people are going to be searching for experiences to actually physically get them out of their houses and into retail locations. So this is an extreme example, but hopefully it makes a point, and that is that tall buildings and shadowed streets are not a good experience. So rather than giving you examples from all over the world, which I could do, I'm going to try to give you examples that are close to home so that hopefully they'll resonate with you. You can picture them in your mind. So in the new downtown core of Toronto, they are trying to put a lot of retailing on the main floor of both commercial and residential buildings. And guess what? There are empty storefronts and constant turnover of tenants going on in that area right now because of the fact that the high density and the shadowing and the claustrophobia that a person feels walking in that area makes it highly unattractive. Conversely, and this is very close to home, hopefully you'll recognize this as Lower Brant Street in Burlington. Low densities, sunshine, and open vistas are good experiences. And I was down taking pictures on a day when the whole streetscape was just abuzz with people sitting in patios, walking around, going in and out of shops and having a great old time. They were not shadowed, they felt quite open, and they were spending money. The quintessential example of a successful main streeting experience is Vancouver's Robson Street. And I have been a keen observer of Robson Street for almost 25 years, my whole real estate career. And it has gone from a struggling retail streetscape to one that is well known all over the world and which achieves $250 per square foot in rents and up. So a good residential development, if it's a rental, achieves $34 a square foot a year. And to contrast that with $250 per square foot per year tells you that strong residential, retail will always make deals pencil out way faster than residential. I was fortunate enough on a recent business trip to have a hotel room where I had a bird's eye view. So I'd ask you to look very carefully at this. I wish I had a pointer. In fact, maybe this is a pointer. Nah, I guess it's not. What I'd like you to see is that on Robson Street, you can tell where Robson Street is even though you can't see it, because they, especially since they started to make tremendous efforts for Robson Street to become viable, they have not allowed high density on Robson Street, and most. Oh, perfect. All right. So Robson Street. Oh, crap. Technical problems here. Let's see. All right. So Robson Street starts here and goes all the way along here. So you can see that what's going on here is that on the buildings that front onto Robson Street, yes, there are some very old buildings that are 6 stories or even higher, but that all the new properties are basically 4 stories or less. And that across the lane, so this is a lane backing onto the stores that front onto Robson Street, that's where the higher density is, or again, across the street, across the lane, this is where the high densities are. The point here is that in order to make Robson this fantastic experience, there has to be lots of sunshine and openness, not basically a wall of darkness and shading. And so slightly stepped back buildings just don't accomplish that. You've got to get the density off of the street. Another thing that's very critical is that parking is organized off of the high street. That is a truism of every successful high street all over the world. So in conclusion, Bronte Harbour has winning conditions to bring in day trippers. It has the harbour, it's got the pier, it's got the park, it's got the beach. So day trippers are a tremendous additional trade area that comes into your shopping area, on an incidental basis. But when they come, it expands your trade area tremendously. It expands the kind of incomes that you can hope to generate retail sales off of. And Bronte Village has the potential to be a successful high street if it offers both the day trippers and area residents an experience. It's got to be pedestrian happy. It's got to be open, not shaded. What I've tried to do with these very simple pictures and these comments is to try to actually thread together, as I said, a fairly complex idea, and that is that by allowing people to promote the idea of bonusing as a good thing to make Bronte develop, you're actually cutting off your nose to spite your face. Because as less and less, typical commodity stuff is bought on, main streets, and as more of what goes on at shopping centers goes on to the internet, you're going to have a whole bunch of shopping center owners showing up and asking you to redevelop their sites into high-density residential. And I know of one that's coming. And he hasn't even contacted you, but they contacted me. At the same time, for you to instead be looking in the rearview mirror and pushing high density onto this very formative area that is just in its real infancy in terms of what it will be is very backward looking. And so what I'd ask you to do is to consider that you want to preserve what's special about Bronte Village by not injecting a lot of density to create a small dark wind tunnel. Particularly, be very, very sensitive to the kind of shading that, you know, you put on the south side of the street, because in the earlier presentation by staff, they even showed how darkly a 4-story building shades the south side of the street in the early afternoon. There's a reason why people want to be on the sunny side of the street, as the song goes. So in summary, you know, there's going to be plenty of opportunities for you to put density in all kinds of areas that are crying out financially for them. They haven't approached you yet. They're going to be here. All I have to do is look at the United States, and you will see how devastating it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall, for your information. There's a question for you from Councillor Elder.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. I thought it was a pretty good job. But Robson Street, what's the density like around Robson Street?
The density is pretty high on Robson Street, but actually most of the retail sales come from non-residents. Most of them.
That are visiting Vancouver.
Visiting Vancouver.
Okay, I'll buy that. But, okay, so what do you want to do with Bronte? Like, you've said what we don't like. What do you want? Do you want the main street to remain 2 or 3 stories? And you want apartments and high-rise on either side, so it has the...
Okay, so you already have a lot of density in Bronte. If density was the solution to your retail area, you'd already have a solution. Because Bronte has far more than its share of this city's high density. If I would crank it out on a per capita basis, which I haven't because it would be too much work, I'm not getting paid for that, I could show that on a per capita basis that there's far more density in Bronte than any other area of this city. So what I'm saying to you is that, yes, you want to keep the main street of Bronte very open, very sunny, and very quaint. And you want to be pushing off development to places that haven't even come to talk to you yet, which are your many strip centers in town, who probably over the five-year period are going to lose their grocery stores.
So you're saying leave Bronte the way it is? Is that what you're saying?
No, Bronte's got a lot of parking on the street, you know, right off the bat, that needs a solution. And I'm not here today to bring you a solution. I'm here to make a comment that there's a problem. You need to basically bring your stores right up to the, you know, to the sidewalk, or have patios between the stores and the sidewalk. And you want to get the parking right off of Lakeshore.
Well, maybe if Councillor Robinson puts in parking meters, it may cut down on the parking down there. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, the solving that parking problem is not going to be easy. I can tell you that. But you already have a model yourself in your very viable downtown Oakville.
And we're addressing it later tonight.
Which you're going to talk about later, but you don't want to mess it up, because you've got something really great going downtown. And what I'm saying is use that as a model for Bronte, because actually Bronte's got far more to attract tourists than downtown Oakville. It's got all of the things that would bring people to a Niagara-on-the-Lake, a Picton, or you know, some of the other centers that are quickly becoming, you know, magnets. Barrie, Ontario.
Okay, well, I thank you for your information. Thanks.
Councillor Lischina.
Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Marshall. You started out your presentation talking about the online buying, and last week I believe I heard the stat that it's about 12%. According to your research, is that quickly moving in the higher direction, or is it? Can you make a comment on that?
Yes, I work with a lot of shopping center owners who are absolutely terrified for the future of their grocery stores. Amazon buying Whole Foods was a harbinger of what is to come, just like Walmart coming into Canada was a harbinger of what was going to happen to Zellers and Kmart and a whole host of other people that couldn't, you know, move with the new trends. People really, you know, are very busy, and they don't want to spend time doing mundane stuff physically in bricks and mortar if they can click and buy. And so really, you know, as I said, you know, where there's just tremendous escalation in retail sales per square foot and in rents per square foot as a result of that are in the high streets of the world. London, Champs-Élysées in Paris, Oxford Street in London. There's many of them all over the world. The Mink Mile, even downtown Toronto, the Miracle Mile in Chicago. Like, this is where the future of retailing is. And unfortunately, the, really crappy looking, mishmash shopping center that was built in 3 phases, is really going to find itself full of small vacancies the moment that the big grocery store anchor leaves. So, it's like, get ready for it.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
Any other questions?
You did a good job.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Ann Sargent.
Who's the delegate? Welcome, Ms. Sargent. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors, staff, and stakeholders here in the audience who all love our area, as we do. I'm representing the 190 businesses and the volunteer board of the Bronte BIA, mostly of whom are independent small business entrepreneurs who, for the most part, live and work and have invested in our community. There are some that live elsewhere, but there are many that are here. I want to speak to the excerpts from the Livable Oakville Bronte Village Growth Area Open House panels, just as a basis for speaking points, if I may. So the introduction states that Bronte Village is envisioned as a vibrant community with a thriving commercial area, with housing opportunities providing a year-round environment for residents, employees, and visitors. Great statement, and that's what we want. Currently, we have a small community population in our trading area with the lake on one side, which limits the mobility of people being able to traverse our area. It's a limited footprint. We have a mishmash of building styles, some needing demolition or serious investment. We are losing desirable businesses to nearby areas for a number of reasons. Leases not being offered, people have a wait-and-see attitude. There are dominoes happening, there's development on the horizon. So this is happening. So there's great uncertainty with the business population. Increased rents not seen as fair for the rundown buildings. Again, landlords not wanting to invest until they see the dominoes hit. The space is too small. Our catchment area is too small. We have low foot traffic and lack of public parking spaces. Winter is tough for retail. We lose population going south, and people are not shopping local and supporting their local businesses enough, as evidenced by a loss of so many businesses in the past year, and there's going to be another dozen leaving our building, which I'll get to in a minute. We often get emails and messages on social media commenting on our excellent small shops and services and asking why we can't attract more, which goes to Ms. Marshall's comments, and we completely agree with this. People are seeking experiences with the falling bricks and mortar everywhere. People will come out and go and find someone who knows their name, someone who knows their preferences. So it's a great question. You should know that we've also lost a number of beautiful shops of the very type we desire. We've had them and they've left. Bricks and mortar retail is under siege. With online as well as big box. There is demand for personal services and excellence, and we're very fortunate to have an amazing array of phenomenal independently owned businesses in Bronte who are tremendous practitioners, service providers, as well as fashion, as well as any service you could imagine. We could be called the Health and Wellness Center of Oakville, given the diversity and the modalities that are offered in health and wellness, for example. We have high-tech businesses. We're very blessed in that regard. We ask that everybody support local shopping. That money that you spend locally stays in our community. Goal, Bronte Village will be a vibrant community with a thriving commercial area and a variety of housing opportunities that provide a year-round environment for residents, employees, and visitors. Development concept. The Bronte Village Main Street District, located along Lakeshore Road and Bronte Road, is the focus area for revitalization and new development. This district is planned as a vibrant, yes, it comes up often, and it does come up often because this is what we need, and these are your words from your Livable Oakville plan. A vibrant Main Street area with ground floor commercial uses with residential or office uses on upper floors. High-quality urban design and landscape streetscapes are encouraged. Our response to that, our comment on that, is our commercial space is eroding. Former commercial space, now residential. The Amica Retirement Community, Bronte Road. The historic old buildings, now zoned residential. Glendella House, Old Post Office, Bronte Art Gallery. These residences do not contribute to the BIA's efforts for beautification and marketing of our area. The Bronte Village Mall. We've been waiting years for this project to have a robust mix of retail, commercial, and residential. While we're very pleased that this project is finally moving ahead, we were definitely hoping for a greater retail and commercial mix along with the proposed residential to truly revitalize this major tract on our high street, our Lakeshore Road. Retail will be reduced substantially from the former footprint. Erosion of our business space puts added pressure on the BIA to assist our existing businesses in attracting businesses to the area. It is the BIA members who pay through a levy to put up flowering baskets, planters, lighted decorations, produce events, and to generate new projects to the destination for the enjoyment of residents, businesses, and visitors alike. If business growth stagnates or dies, the burden of cost of such things may revert to the residents. 2368 Lakeshore Road. Our BIA office is situated here. The building also houses Sammy's chip truck in the summer. All that land is proposed to be a long-term retirement medical care facility with an Alzheimer neighborhood and other for residents who will be completely serviced from within. They will require full care and will not be venturing out to shop, dine, acquire services. Sadly, that's the reality of this proposed facility. There is a need for this with the aging population. We are not opposed to such a facility at all. We are opposed to having it located on such a major tract of our commercial Main Street. We suggest that other locations would be preferable, perhaps the Legion site that was mentioned earlier. And we already have a large retirement residence, a lovely one, on Bronte Road. We had hoped for 2368 Lakeshore to be developed into a mix of ground floor retail, of which there will be some commercial office space, of which there will be none, and condos or rental units to give us more population with a more varied age demographic. This is not happening as per the Livable Oakville goals. 12 businesses within our BI building will have to leave and find alternate space or relocate to other areas. We have no suitable and affordable space to go to. The BIA we don't know where to go. There isn't a suitable space. We have some ugly gaps on Lakeshore Road. Through Bronte, we need to pay attention to the Lakeshore Road businesses who lament to being in the dead zone with no traffic, little public parking. And I mean no foot traffic. There's lots of car traffic, convoys going by endlessly, not stopping. Little public parking. We only have 212 public parking spots in Bronte. The rest are private and people are ticketed. We have buildings that are proven to not work for traditional retail businesses due to the small footprint, lack of accessibility. We have gaps, areas looking derelict. We need to draw more pedestrians, not just car traffic. Finally, we're competing in not only the GTA, but in a global marketing arena for new residents and from visitors who earn money elsewhere and drop it into our local economy. The objectives to conserve and enhance the historic lakeside village character. Bronte is a designated tourist area with many blessings, with the lovely park, trails, lake. We promote our historic roots proudly, but fail to deliver on the promise to tourists, expecting our whole area to be quaint and beautiful. We need to fix the gaps and deliver to the expectations and live up to the promise with innovative models to suit our community. Height and density seems to be the lightning rod. There hasn't been a substantive application presented since 2008. This has to change. We are lagging behind other areas. We are not proposing skyscrapers. Our businesses love Bronte too and do not wish to destroy the village feel and character, the small town sense of neighborhood. However, with our small footprint, we need some reasonable height and density to survive and thrive as a livable Oakville community. What we are proposing is that a developer investor needs more height to build something that is economically viable and realize a profit. We have submitted a case study scenario to the town questioning a current consultant's study. It's based on the profitability and the ROI on 6 stories. We were questioning this report and are delighted to have heard from the town that we will have a meeting to further dialogue in the submission. Our position from the Bronte BIA is presented to the town and it's on record. The review, we hope that the review may result in updated zoning and urban design guidelines. Again, we're grateful for the opportunity for an October 30th a meeting with the town coming up. And we thank you sincerely, and we love the interaction with our residents through our Bronte Facebook page. There's been a lot of Bronte love shared over the summer due to the Muskoka chairs and the Bronte Heritage Trail. So we're all on the same page in terms of loving Bronte and wanting to do the right thing. So we just want to find a harmonious solution and sensible balance that residents and the businesses can all be happy and thrive here. That's the end of my remarks, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Sargent, for your information. Councillor Elgrim.
Ms. Sargent, thanks for coming. I heard you say at the very beginning you agree with what Ms. Marshall said, but it seems the more you talk, the more you seem to be going the other way.
Actually, sir, through you, Mayor Burton, I agree with some of the things she said. On retail, I agree that you can't build caverns and shading and buildings that are tall right on the edge of the street. There are many best practices models in towns like ours, and ours in particular is a harbor town. So they're beautiful models that could be done with creative facades and setbacks that can create a beautiful feel, no shadowing, and no sense of being in a canyon. So I didn't agree with everything she said, but I certainly agree with her idea that Bronte is special. People who have come here, who live here, love it. People who've just moved here love it. I understand how they cherish it, as we do, as I do, having lived here, lived in Bronte a long time. So I get it that on the resident side, I understand it. We want to preserve and protect, but from a business side, if we've lost a lot of businesses and we're going to lose more, and change is inevitable, absolutely. But we don't have space. We have nowhere to move the 12 businesses out of our BIA building, including us. Rents, developers or owners are sitting there with space for $7,000 a month. They'd rather sit on it than divide it and rent it. We don't have slice and dice condominium space. People ask us, why don't we get a Starbucks? Well, first of all, we're not really, that might be a good thing for some people, but not for everybody. We don't want to be a copycat, second cup Starbucks in every corner. That's why Bronte is different. That's why it's so wonderful to live here and that village feel. So I agree with some of what Ms. Marshall said, but not all. I think it's possible to develop this harbor feel in a responsible way with the right developers willing to listen and to sit down with the residents and the business community. And I think we can have a win.
Yeah, I'm hoping that, I'm hoping that you and Ms. Marshall do sit down together, because tonight we're just receiving information, and I think if the two of you can get together on something, it may be very helpful for everyone.
Well, I thought the same.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Sargent, on behalf of council, one of the things we're here tonight to do is to find out what people think of the staff proposal that they've published and presented for your comment. Do you think the draft amendment that they're seeking public input on tonight will help you or hurt you? Are you for it or against it?
Well, sir, we've already put in our position several times. It's on record with the town. I think that the amendments, we still need dialogue. We still need to stand with our board and sit down and discuss the particulars.
Do you know when you might provide us that? Well, first off, you just confused me. You already have a position on the amendment, or you don't?
Oh, you mean what is proposed this evening?
Well, the meeting is about this draft amendment.
Yes, sir.
And you said that you've sent in a submission already?
We've sent in submissions on what our comments on the Bronte official growth area review and what we need. I've heard some things tonight that I'm not able to speak for the board on the amendment before us tonight, but we will gather as an economic development and board group with the town staff.
All right. Well, we're anxious to have your input on the amendment.
Thank you. We are too. We're anxious to provide it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Romero.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, just in case it was missed, it is, the BIA's comments are 3 pages in here on the whole report in here tonight that everybody has on their comments, and it's very in-depth, and it goes over all of the issues that have been brought up. But if I may, Ms. Sargent, thank you very much for presenting here tonight. Can you tell us in general what your businesses, if your businesses feel that they have enough foot traffic in order to succeed in Bronte?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, Councillor, they do not. Again, we have a small population. Half of the people go, the lucky ones go away for half the year, but there are a lot of people who are on a pension and seniors who can't afford that. And we have an older demographic, that's obvious. We have a lot of new people moving in. But no, we do not have the foot traffic, and we have geosensors on Lakeshore Road now through our Bronte Heritage Trail project that we're endeavoring to count the traffic. And on Lakeshore Road at the point of Nelson and Lakeshore, we'd be lucky to get 100 people walking by a day. Now, downtown Oakville or Burlington, which is a huge population and it's dense in its downtown core, you know, obviously that would be far more. So the answer is no, sir.
And we heard earlier that Bronte has one of the largest per capita densities in Oakville or in these other places. I mean, you work pretty routinely with other businesses and BIAs in Oakville. How would you rate the density in Bronte?
It's too low. It's too low. We have a 2,500 population within our catchment area. I do not agree with Ms. Marshall's take on that, no.
And the work that the BIA has done in terms of its pro forma on the economic viability of businesses, is there? I know it's going through, you know, this height 4 and 6 and this gateway 10, but are we talking the BIA would like to see a couple more stories in some certain locations, or general overall everywhere, or I mean, what's the feel of the BIA board in terms of where and what magnitude you think would help the businesses succeed?
Well, we have submitted comments on a consultant study that the town has done based on a mathematical ROI on a 6-story building. So we've challenged that, and again, we're going to speak to the town planning staff about that because we disagree with the consultant's report, and all we want is to sit down and share our math and have a response, you know, blow by blow, because we don't think it gels at all. Really, we are not proposing density all across our high street. We're looking at anchor locations like East Street, the Gateway. We're looking at Bronte Road and Lakeshore. Our commercial space at the mall is cut by half, so we're going to have 2 condo towers there, which is great for population growth, which we desperately need. But we are not proposing that we build 10 stories all along Lakeshore, but there are key areas that can handle it. And again, we have a small footprint. We have nowhere to go but up. But we are not proposing, again, skyscrapers. Apparently, the developers say they can't make any money at 6 stories, that 10 Maybe, but then when you talk underground parking, I think the cost of those is about $60,000 a spot. So it's a very difficult situation. We're a very small area, and our businesses are telling us that they're worried, and they're leaving. They're leaving because there's no room to expand if they're doing well even. So that's the concern.
And thank you. And just lastly, Sergeant, I don't know where all of the properties' boundaries are, but they seem to be rather small, and many of them. So does that add difficulties in terms of land assemblies or in terms of
Tremendously so, sir. It's they're all chopped up. They're owned by many different small owners. So it makes the ability to bundle these properties and package a shovel-ready piece of land very difficult to make it interesting for an investor and developer. Very difficult indeed.
Well, I thank you very much, and on behalf of the business community, for speaking here tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Worship, Mr. Sergeant. Did all the merchants in the area that you represent and that Sean and I represent, were they made aware of this meeting here this evening?
Yes, they were.
And what type of an attendance do we have here from the Bronte BIA area? Have you any idea? I don't know.
I didn't get RSVPs, Councillor Robinson, so, some of them are working still till 9 o'clock. They want revitalization of Bronte. That's what they want. And for the past 10 years, we've submitted through the BI multiple submissions to the town on behalf of the merchants wanting revitalization. And finally, stuff's happening. It's good things are happening. But it has to happen in the right way. And right now, we feel that there's more discussion needed.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Chisholm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Quick question. You made the comment, Anne, with respect to 6 and 10 stories. So I'm clear here. You said 6 stories, and I'm getting down the weeds. Maybe with this a further discussion offline, but 6 stories, you're telling me there's not a profit to be made by the landowners at 6 stories, but rather than the 10 is the magic number?
Not the magic number, the baseline, we'd suggest. Again, not along the street, the whole street, in key areas that can handle that height intensification. But 6 is a non-starter, according to our math, respectfully, and that's what we want to sit down with the town and go toe-to-toe on the detail of the consultant's report. And we'd like that opportunity. And we may be proven wrong, that's fine, but we really need to do that.
And with respect to the report being received tonight, and how council votes on this, are you leaning towards what has been presented tonight as a positive for the Bronte Village growth area? Is this a positive?
On many fronts, yes, but there is still the issues. There's still the issues of the height and that density to be discussed in key areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hutchins.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. You're mentioning there's not enough foot traffic, and density is what you want. What type of density? Are we talking office? Are we talking residence? Are we talking a mix? What?
Well, we need more retail, and we need, frankly, offices. We have live-work units that have never worked. They don't work for traditional retail. The footprint is too small. They can't carry a large enough inventory to turn it over, these tiny little boutiques. And again, some of them are going to go because they're not going to survive. We've already lost some. So the live-work units have never worked based on the European idea of living upstairs and having your business downstairs. The parking continues to be an issue, and some of our merchants are their own worst enemies with parking right in front of their stores all day because they have offices with 8, 9, 10 people in them. When I do exit interviews with our businesses, I ask them why they leave. Not enough parking, not enough street traffic. So that is why we've turned into a primarily service-oriented community. as opposed to a shopping destination. Even on our beautiful Bronte Road, which is desired and an attractive place with patios and so on, we have offices in windows that should be our beautiful retail attractors. We have offices and people sitting in there taking up the parking spots, and they're not attractors. They're not attendance generators. They're not visitor drivers. So, and they're closed on the weekends. They're closed at 5 o'clock at night. So the more we take up our tiny little footprint and available space with this type of business, and I'm not knocking our wonderful businesses, please understand, but we're displacing the traditional retail, experiential kind of stuff that's open at night on weekends because we don't have the kind of space that they need. So we need space for employees to live and work and buy lunches, and hang around after 5, and we need offices. We need retail, Main Street retail that isn't turning into boring offices. Sorry. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Sargent. I believe that we've heard you to be saying you need more. Your response to the amendment is nice start, but more, please. Is that right?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's where we're at.
I'm glad to finally understand that.
Sorry I took so long, sir.
It wasn't you. Thank you very much for coming, though.
Thank you.
That was our last listed delegation for this item. Are there other members of the public with information on this item for council's consideration? Oh, yes, sir. Would you come forward and identify yourself?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do I need to do anything with this?
Well, you need to talk toward the microphone, too.
Okay.
And if you just introduce yourselves.
Yeah, my name is Dave Nelson. I'm lucky enough to live on Lakeshore Road West, just west of Bronte. And so I'm confused a little about the Parkway, Beltway type area. There's about 4 or 5 different designations there with natural area, parks open space, waterfront open space, green belt, urban river valley. So is that whole area protected at the same level? Or is some of it more, a better risk, more at risk of having buildings on it? Like, for instance, the Bronte Bluffs area. I see it every day, and in the summertime it is crowded with families and kids on the beach and lots of things going on there. And so it's not really included in the Beltway designation I see here. So I'm just a little confused, and if I could just get some clarification from someone on, does that whole green and blue area that I see at the bottom of the Schedule P1, Bronte Village land use, is it all protected at the same level?
Mr. Sunderland each of those is a different kind of treatment.
Yeah.
But in terms of what I take to be the direction of your question, none of them are permitting development.
Okay.
Mr. Sunderland will answer your question, though.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, you're absolutely correct. None of the designations in those areas permit development. They're all meant to be maintained more as open space, passive parkland. So the types of uses that you see today are expected to continue in those locations.
Is there a way to put a higher level of protection on them so that in 20 years from now, when we have a less listening kind of council who maybe gets talked into building a condo tower on Bronte Bluffs?
So through you.
I think maybe that's a political question.
Well, yeah,
I'm happy to answer it for
you.
Okay,
please.
If I stray, Mr. Sunderland is not afraid to correct me.
Okay.
There is no way to permanently protect anything in Canada or Ontario.
Right.
Citizen vigilance is all that gets you what you've got here, and it's all that'll keep it.
I'll be watching.
That's what I wanted to hear. No,
And
it's
as I
very
say,
important. It's very important. We can have as good a community as we are willing to work together to create full-time, and if we slack off, we'll get what we deserve. I think it's the most important lesson we ever learn in life about community life.
Thank you. I've met Councillor O'Meara when they had the open house for the apartment towers right at the corner of Bronte and Lakeshore, and you know, got good explanations on that. And I support what you're doing here, but like I say, it's critical, as these other people have said too, that what's open now is protected, and that's what's important to me and all the people I talk to who, you know, live in my area, and I talk on the street. So
That's what's important to the whole town as we understand it today, and it's certainly what's important to this council.
Okay. I think you're all doing a very good job, but you are being watched.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We like being watched. It's good. It's a good part of a healthy community, so don't stop. Any others? If not, we'll turn to the next item and maybe finish tonight, and who knows, we'll see. We're paid to come back, so, you know, it's no trouble if you want to spend more than tonight on this.
Your worship, I believe there's a motion that you need.
I'm about to ask for one.
Okay, well, I'll give you
But
that then.
everybody's eager that I stop wasting time. So Councillor Robinson is moving receipt of the information. All those in favor?
Sorry, Your Worship, prior to that, my apologies, but I did have a quick question of staff, and I don't want to commandeer this any longer.
It's your privilege.
Well, thank you. I just after what we've heard from the BIA and everything that we've looked for, I'm wondering if staff could commit to reviewing, just as an option, to look at where, if there's a location somewhere where we might be able to work with the BIA on an option of a deeper lot maybe to go to an 8 or allow or a 6, but I would like to at least look at what a potential for that option might be next time we see this. I'm wondering if staff might be able to do that for us.
Well, Councillor, that's the point of the meeting. And the point of citizen input under the Planning Act is they now have to consider what they've heard. And furthermore, they have to tell us how they dealt with it.
Well, I'm glad, because then it's not just him that's watching as well. It's all of us. Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you.
Your Worship, I just reconsidered something earlier. I was going to declare a conflict on the next item. I've just reconsidered my position. I am going to declare a conflict of interest on the Kerr Street item in the abundance of caution. And my reason for doing that is that I'm the operator of a business that will be impacted by the outcome of that study. So I'm going to sit out this discussion.
That's your, thank you for the declaration. That actually allows you to leave the meeting, too. Only for the item. He has to come back. He doesn't have to leave. Mr. Sunderland, I think we're finally ready to hear from you on the next item.
So again, thank you, Mayor, members of Council. The report for the Kerr Village Growth Area Review, which is item 13 in your agenda package and found on page 217 of tonight's agenda. Again, the purpose of this report is to introduce the proposed OPA that has resulted from the Kerr Village Growth Area Review and Study process. No recommendation is being made tonight, and we continue to seek comments from the public. So before I get started into this presentation, I'd just like to point out that you'll notice some consistent themes emerging from the Kerr Village Growth Area Review, as was the case in the Bronte Village presentation. Given both Kerr and Bronte are identified as Main Street areas within the town's urban structure, which are planned to accommodate some intensification suitable to the unique character of each area, you'll see some of the same policies and directions applied, but within a Kerr Village context. So much the same as the Bronte Village Growth Area Review process, the Kerr Village Growth Area Review pretty much followed along the same timeline, providing for the same public consultation opportunities. So over the course of the Kerr Village Growth Area Review, which began in May of 2015, staff held 2 public open houses, 2 public information sessions, and have attended and hosted several stakeholder meetings. At each step of the study process, public engagement and consultation was a key component of the review. Following each public engagement event, staff presented the public input heard to the Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee, and the same materials as the Bronte report, but within a Kerr Village context. A draft OPA has been prepared for tonight's meeting, representing a balance of inputs. The next slides walk you through the proposed OPA. So the boundary adjustments. The OPA proposes to adjust the growth area boundary eastward to include the area bounded by Forsyth Drive to the west, Rebecca Street to the north, 16 Mile Creek to the east, and Lakeshore Road to the south, as well as westward to include the area bounded by Dorval Drive to the west, Rebecca Street to the north, Maurice Drive to the east, and Lakeshore Road to the south. Capturing these areas was generally seen to be consistent with the current land use permissions and a natural extension of the growth area boundary. The lands to the east is currently designated high-density residential and contains existing apartment buildings. Including it within the Kerr Village growth area boundary would reinforce the existing link between the lower Kerr Village district and downtown Oakville. Recent development in the west is consistent with the existing policy direction for Kerr Village to accommodate intensification with a mix of residential and commercial uses. The area is currently designated for high and medium density residential uses and some mixed uses on the north side of Lakeshore Road, west to Dorval Drive. It's considered a logical extension to the lower Kerr Village district. The Central Business District designation. The OPA proposes to replace the Central Business District designation and redesignate the properties in this area to reflect the existing built context and further the objectives for Lakeshore Road to be the focus for mixed-use development along a commercial main street. In an effort to promote consistency and remove policy duplication, staff are proposing that the low-density residential designation, medium-density residential, high-density residential, Main Street 1, Main Street 2, and urban core land use designations can be applied to the existing CBD area to achieve the same objectives and reflect the existing built context, providing for a 4-story height limit along Lakeshore Road. The only location which is contemplated for more than 4 stories is on the north side of Lakeshore Road at Kerr Street. This intersection is identified as a gateway, and staff are proposing that an additional 2 stories would be appropriate in this location to a maximum of 6 stories. Those 2 properties are hard to see on this schedule, but they are located right here, and they are designated as Main Street 2. The northwest quadrant of the Kerr and Spears intersection. In an effort to improve opportunities for comprehensive redevelopment, the OPA proposes to consolidate the northwest quadrant of Kerr Street and Spears into one land use designation, being urban core. The urban core designation permits 8 to 12-story buildings with a bonusing overlay, providing for an additional 4 stories up to 16 stories. The intention is to simplify the land use direction for the entire block and provide for an additional development opportunity within the Upper Kerr Village district. A new exception policy is also proposed for this block, which would require that development in this quadrant be based on a comprehensive development plan demonstrating the potential full build-out of the site. Given this quadrant has several property parcels under different ownership, this policy is to ensure that as development applications are received by the town requesting to redevelop individual properties, staff can ensure a development application received and processed first would not preclude the appropriate development of adjacent parcels. This policy is not intended to prohibit individual properties from developing at separate times, so long as it can be demonstrated that doing so would not preclude the long-term development of adjacent parcels within the block. A comprehensive development plan will also ensure that the necessary road improvements anticipated in this area are also considered in the context of the proposed development. The Oakville Senior Center. The OPA proposes to redesignate the Oakville Senior Center property from Main Street 1 to Main Street 2, which would increase building height permissions and allow a 4 to 6 story building. This change is considered appropriate based on the surrounding context, which includes an existing 7-story apartment building and institutional uses. This change would not preclude another use, such as a community facility or another community use, or commercial use, from using the existing Oakville Senior Center building in the future. Lands eligible for bonusing. Similar to Bronte Village, the OPA proposes the introduction of expanded areas eligible for bonusing on the Main Street 1 designated properties along Kerr Street. This would allow for the consideration of an additional 2 stories in building height in exchange for a community benefit. The land use permissions would allow building heights of 2 to 4 stories with an additional 2 stories eligible through bonusing to a maximum of 6 stories. A range of community benefits are identified in the policies for Kerr Village, including such things as affordable housing, public art, enhanced streetscapes, and open space improvements. This policy change is informed by the Assessment of Redevelopment Viability Study prepared by Enberry Lyon Consulting, provided to the subcommittee in October of 2016. The report indicated that increase in height of 2 stories would have a positive impact for market viability for Kerr Village in the future. Adding bonusing eligibility to the Main Street 1 sites is intended to support reinvestment in Kerr Village as the market evolves. Urban design. The OPA proposes new revised and reformatted urban design policies to strengthen and enhance the existing urban design policies for Kerr Village. The new urban design schedule is also introduced, which visually articulates the policies as seen on this slide. Further to the official plan amendment, urban design direction specific to Kerr Village is currently being developed by urban design staff for inclusion in the Livable by Design Urban Design Manual. The design direction will become a key document for implementing the official plan policies and will be applied to all development proposals and public projects in Kerr Village. Appendix C attached to the staff report contains preliminary design direction. The urban design work continues to evolve and is to be brought forward for council endorsement at a future date. As part of the updated Provincial Greenbelt Plan 2017, new urban river valley policies have been introduced. This is very familiar to the Bronte context. There are now lands within Kerr Village that are subject to the Greenbelt Plan's urban river valley. The new policy mapping overlay has been added, which refers to the authority and policies of the Greenbelt Plan for lands subject to the urban river valley. Once again, the policies of the Greenbelt Plan urban river valley only apply to publicly owned lands and do not apply to private property. However, for our purpose of moving towards conformity with these plans, we are showing them on the land use schedules as they appear in the Greenbelt Plan. Density targets. The OPA proposes to amend the growth target for Kerr Village, similar to Bronte, with new policy language to express growth as minimum planned density, which is consistent with the language in the new Provincial Growth Plan 2017. This is the same change contemplated as the Bronte Village OPA. Making this change now will position the town for its future conformity exercise to be completed at the end of the overall official plan review process in coordination with Halton Region's official plan review. Lastly, the OPA proposes a number of housekeeping amendments to ensure consistency in language and to reflect the additional policy amendments that have been introduced. So with the conclusion of this presentation, staff recommend that the comments from the public with respect to the town-initiated official plan amendment to the Livable Oakville Plan to implement the Kerr Village Growth Area Review be received.
Thank you, Mr. Sunderland. Councillor Dunick.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and also for all the work that's gone into this. Could you go back to where you had 2 designated areas for streetscaping enhancements on the, right there? Mm-hmm. Could you give an sort of an, broad overview what you mean by enhanced streetscape area?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, the enhanced streetscape areas are identified in certain locations along Kerr Street, which are opportunities to provide for additional public open space areas or pedestrian-oriented spaces. So, for example, in the area around Cowan Square or Heritage Square, towards the center of the area there, there's opportunities where if a development application were to come in, we may ask that the building facade be set back from the property line to provide for additional space for patios, wider sidewalks, enhanced streetscape like trees and that sort of thing to really provide visual enhancement along the street edge. So there's a number of ways that can happen.
Okay, sort of building on that, one of the things that we've the Kerr Village BIA has been wrestling with for quite some time, mostly from a financial component, similar to what Ms. Sargent had made reference to about the business owners, for lack of a better word, paying the majority of the streetscaping enhancements. Is there an opportunity along the Lakeshore Road frontage for us to build in some sort of component, and I don't want to use bonusing, but something like that, that we, if development takes place, we have an opportunity to secure some funds that will go towards, for instance, we don't have GFIs and some of the light standards, things of that nature, so that we have a more continuous, what shall I say, lakeshore presence as it leads into the downtown area.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's definitely something that we can look into further to see if there are opportunities in that regard. And I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. With respect to the bonusing, and it's not as of right, it's in specific areas and so forth. And there has been some discussion through this process with respect to if we're going to those heights, and always the issue is parking, surface parking and so forth. Will there be consideration when applications do come in with respect to the height or bonusing that a condition upon this would be underground parking?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as the development applications come forward along this area, we do encourage underground parking. It's likely that if they were to come forward with a 6-story building on any individual site, the only way that they would be able to accommodate the parking required would be underground. So that is definitely something that we would be encouraging.
Thank you. And my last is rather not a question, just a comment. With the official plan amendment to Kerr Street Village, the transition is a real concern for a lot of the residents with respect to the commercial. Well, we're changing the zoning on that, but it's so close in proximity that a sensitivity be put through the process with respect to separation of residential versus Kerr Street. So is there a consideration to keep that in hand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of the items that was not touched on in the presentation, but speaks directly to your point, there are 2 things. One is that we ask for buildings to be stepped back after the 3rd story when they are adjacent to low-density residential areas. And there's also a policy which would provide for that additional flexibility of uses on the ground floor. So for on side streets, for example, on a primary street, in this image here, you would be required to provide that commercial frontage, but in behind or perhaps on a side street, you could provide for residential units on the ground floor. So there'd be opportunities to kind of blend that development into the adjacent neighborhood a bit better.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, one more time, can we agree never to use the word growth target ever again? Because nowhere in the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe 2017 that became effective July the 1st does it ever have those 2 words together. Growth forecast, yes, it is a number. Targets, they are minimums, and it's ratios. So please, because they use it against us, they can and they will later on. And when I say, I'm talking about the developers will say, well, those are minimums. So if we can strike that, I know it's in the report here too, so if we can, going forward, if we never see those two words, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, duly noted.
I knew that was coming. Madam Clerk, are there registered delegations on this?
We do not have any registered delegations.
Do we have members of the public here with information for council on this? Yes, sir. Would you please feel welcome to come down to the microphone and introduce yourself and share your information?
It's actually a question regarding the streetscape and urban design concept. My name's Ken Thompson. I live on Spears Road in Oakville. We've had the recent development on the northeast corner, and the streetscape is essentially concrete. Or are we to expect more of the same?
Well, I imagine it depends on where you're talking. Let's see what the commissioner and the planning director and the planner would like to say. You guys want to draw for this? I'm going to refer that to the commissioner and see what she does with it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The streetscape that's planned for Kerr Street is not the streetscape you actually see out there now. So there is, as we build out Kerr Street with the underpass underneath the railway location, there was plans built in to accommodate a better streetscape than the concrete pieces that you see right now. So through the redevelopment of the site on the west side of Kerr Street, we'd be looking for similar type of enhancement. And I would ask Brad to comment on whether or not the enhanced streetscape extends up that far. I don't believe it does.
On the urban design schedule, it does not, but it does not preclude us from having a nice, beautiful streetscape up in that area. There's also, as part of that quadrant, direction to provide for another urban square open space type facility. So depending on how that's ultimately arranged on the site when development applications come forward, there's opportunities to provide for some greening of the area.
Okay, one other question. The property on the, would be the southwest corner. I believe it now it's, I think it was a restaurant, but now is an optometry office. Is that one of the properties subject for bonusing under the proposal or not?
So this property here is the optometrist building at the southwest corner of Spears and Kerr. That property is currently designated as urban core. Probably pull up another one that shows the urban core coloring. So there's the urban core coloring on the left-hand side, so it's urban core. That is not subject to bonusing, but it permits building heights of, I believe it's 6 to 8 stories.
Okay, thank you. All right. And I guess finally, was the property on the northeast corner that is recently developed, paved as little as a month and a half ago, was that subject to any approval process through town zoning and landscape architecture elements and such?
So you're talking about the Empire?
Yes.
The two towers?
Yes.
That is an example of planning by the Ontario Municipal Board.
And that precluded the opportunity for the town to have input in decision-making on the exterior treatments and landscaping elements?
That plan was ordered by the board.
Down to that level of detail?
Pardon?
Down to that level of detail? As it related to the appearance of the streetscape?
Yeah, and it's only lately that we've begun to have the ability to influence appearance. When I moved to Oakville, the rule, which was 25 years ago or so, the rule was there was no basis in law to tell people what their building had to look like. We now are developing powers that influences. We're trying to turn them into powers around urban design guidelines. You yes. heard that mentioned several times tonight. So it is what it is, and it's one of many motivations we had in our apparently successful campaign to persuade the province to abolish the board. Unfortunately, not fast enough for our taste.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you, planning staff. We've been here for tonight's presentations and the previous 2 evenings on Glen Abbey, and your staff's doing a fine job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there others with information for council? Doug, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is the BIA opposed or in support of the proposal?
We're in support. We're pleased with, we made some recommendations on the report. We stayed throughout the process. We're pleased with the recommendations that were acted upon.
Thank you very much. Council appreciates having that information. Councillor Dunick.
I'll wait until.
I defer, madam.
I just wanted to add that being on the BIA board, the areas of concern have been addressed through this plan, i.e. the gateway at the bottom of Kerr and Lakeshore, which has often been not only for the BIA, but for the residents in the area a sore point. So hopefully this will move it forward.
It's good for the public to hear these things said, so thank you for that too. Sir, please introduce yourself and share your information.
Thank you. My name is Jim Knowlton. I'm a longtime resident of Oakville, and my wife and I purchased a property at 79 Wilson Street back in the early part of this year, which is part of what was called the old Central Business District. Question is, you had referred to bonusing in certain areas of town and highlighted them with circles. Will other areas, other than the circled areas, be considered for bonusing?
Well, the point of the meeting is for people to ask for what they would like to see. So if you're asking for other areas to be considered, you might not get exactly what you want. I mean, that's kind of a general question.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a particular property that you'd like made eligible for bonusing, it would be, you're more likely, I mean, you're better off to ask for that property.
I'll ask said same thing. Then it's that property at 79 Wilson Street. Is it conceivable that it might be eligible for bonusing?
It'll go into the mix, and they're now obligated to either, whether they say yes or no, they have to say why.
That's fine. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I'll confine it to table and look to the ward. Councillor Duddick moves receipt of the information. All those in favor? And that's carried. And now, number 14. And council and public, if you give your attention to Carly Dodds, she will summarize the proposal for the public so that they know what we're talking about. I mean the public at home, and I'm sure that everybody here is familiar with it. Ms. Dodds.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and members of council. The purpose of this report and presentation is to introduce a draft official plan amendment to implement the findings of the Downtown Oakville Growth Area Review. This report can be found on pages 273 to 322 of tonight's agenda. As mentioned in the Bronte Village and Kerr Village presentations, this is a statutory public meeting where comments from the public may be received. No decisions are to be made at this time. Since the initiation of the official plan review in 2015, staff have worked with many stakeholders, residents, and council to arrive at the draft official plan amendment presented today. An initial open house was held in November 2015 where draft policy directions were introduced. A 3D modeling exercise was then undertaken and several engagement events took place in the spring of 2016 to gain further input on appropriate locations for increased height. Staff reported back to the Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee in June 2016, summarizing the feedback and next steps. Based on the work conducted and feedback received, draft policies were presented to the subcommittee in January 2017. An information session was also held in March 2017 to gain feedback on those draft policies, and then this feedback was again summarized and presented back to the subcommittee in this past June. There we are. We are now beginning the Statutory Planning Act process, and the draft official plan amendment has considered all of the input received throughout the Downtown Oakville Growth Area Review. It is anticipated that a recommendation would be brought to Council before the end of 2017. There have been numerous projects undertaken in downtown Oakville, and this slide summarizes some of the completed and ongoing work. In addition to the significant public engagement opportunities available throughout the study process, staff also considered a number of these studies and initiatives in the development of the proposed policy changes. The proposed official plan amendment includes modifications to the existing land use schedule Q and G, as well as the downtown Oakville policies of section 25 of the Livable Oakville Plan. A new urban design schedule with associated policies is also proposed, and I will provide more detail on these changes in the next slides. The boundary of downtown Oakville is proposed to be extended in the northwest corner to the 16-mile creek and include the valley land currently adjacent to the downtown Oakville. It is a natural extension given its connection and relationship to the downtown area. So currently it is natural area shown in green, and blue is the extension. In addition to the boundary extension, a redesignation of the valley land from natural area to waterfront open space is proposed. The waterfront open space designation permits a range of uses, including parks, active or passive outdoor recreational uses, minor structures related to recreational uses, cultural heritage uses, harbors, and legally existing uses and structures. The area is part of the Oakville Harbour, which is currently designated waterfront open space south of Lakeshore Road. The proposed designation change is intended to create greater consistency, recognize existing uses, and provide greater flexibility for the implementation of the Harbour's master plan. It is also intended to facilitate the implementation of the riverfront park envisioned through the Downtown Cultural Hub study. Currently, the whole of downtown is designated Central Business District, or CBD. It's a current commercial designation, and in an effort to promote consistency and remove policy duplication, it's proposed to be replaced by mixed-use designations, including Main Street 1, Main Street 2, Urban Center, and Urban Core, to achieve the same objectives, reflect the existing built context, and respect the Heritage Conservation District. The current CBD has a maximum building height of 4 stories, and the proposed mixed-use designations have a range of heights, some of which exceed this current permission. These designations were determined based on 3D modeling of test sites, public feedback, work completed through the downtown plan, and policies of the Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District Plan. I'm sorry, I forgot to click that forward. So as you can see, the heights are associated in the brackets. On this marked up proposed schedule, existing building heights greater than 4 stories in and around downtown are shown in reference in black. The height ranges for the proposed mixed-use designations are shown in yellow. The proposed designations and associated policies provide for a generally 2-story street edge along the historic Main Street of Lakeshore Road, increasing to 4 or more stories in select locations. These locations are focused at the northwestern and eastern edges in proximity to other existing higher buildings. The direction to focus increased height in these areas was confirmed through the public engagement work completed as part of the Downtown Oakville Growth Area Review and the Downtown Plan. The boundary of the Downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District is also shown as a green dashed line on the proposed schedule. To allow for greater design flexibility to ensure that the development conforms to the other objectives and policies of the Heritage District and the Livable Oakville Plan, a policy that allows for a minimum height of 2 stories regardless of the designation is proposed. For example, The urban core designation has a height range of 8 to 12 stories. However, a minimum of 2 stories, not 8, would be permitted so that appropriate transition could be provided to the adjacent Heritage Conservation District area. Currently, no bonusing is contemplated in downtown Oakville. As a result of the assessment of redevelopment viability report by Enberry Lyon Consulting, which supported 6 stories and more in the downtown, public feedback on the 3D model, and the desire to achieve the vision endorsed by council, eligibility for bonusing of up to 2 additional stories is proposed on select Main Street 1 and Main Street 2 areas outside of the downtown Oakville Heritage Conservation District, away from Lakeshore Road and away from the residential and Heritage District area to the north. The area eligible for bonusing is outlined here in blue. And just back to that, that other image, the proposed designations permit a range of 2 to 4 and 4 to 6 stories, and with the bonusing eligibility, this would increase to potential for 4 to 6 and 6 to 8 stories. As mentioned in the previous presentations, areas eligible for bonusing do not create as-of-right development permissions, and Town Council has the authority and discretion to approve any bonusing. A zoning bylaw amendment application demonstrating that the additional height would not create adverse impacts and a Section 37 agreement with the town providing a community benefit would be required. All of the existing site-specific exceptions within the downtown Oakville growth area allow for building heights greater than 4 stories. The proposed mixed-use designations reflect those permissions, and the exceptions are no longer required under the proposed changes. A new exception is proposed for 187 Navy Street, which recognizes the existing 1-story building and office use. As mentioned in the previous presentations, the new Provincial Greenbelt Plan came into effect on July 1st, 2017, and introduced a new Urban River Valley designation, which now applies to lands within the downtown Oakville growth area. The proposed Land Use Schedule Q1 overlays the provincial mapping of the Greenbelt Urban River Valley. What is important to note is the policies of the Urban River Valley designation only apply to publicly owned lands, even though the mapping also is overlaid on privately owned lands. A new urban design schedule Q2, as well as revised and reformatted urban design policies, are proposed through this amendment. Lakeshore Road is identified as a primary street in blue, which requires commercial, office, community, or cultural uses on the ground floor to support its traditional Main Street function. Buildings are also required to be stepped back after the 2nd story where fronting Lakeshore Road. Randall and Church Street are identified as secondary streets in yellow, and commercial, office, community, cultural, and residential uses are permitted on the ground floor. George Street and a portion of Navy Street are identified as flexible streets in orange, which are intended to prioritize pedestrian and cyclist movement and support special events. This direction is in line with the work completed as part of the downtown plan. Locations of urban squares and gateways are also shown on the schedule and addressed in the urban design policies. There are additional policy updates proposed through this amendment. The vision and objectives which came out of the downtown plan are incorporated in the Downtown Oakville Policy Section 25. New standalone use permissions specific to commercial and residential uses are introduced to ensure the flexibility of the CBD is maintained. New natural heritage policies which address proximity to the 16-Mile Creek are incorporated. Revised policy language around the growth target for downtown Oakville is proposed to align with the policies of the new 2017 growth plan. Like Bronte and Kerr Village, the growth target will be expressed as a minimum plan density through provincial plan conformity coordinated with Halton Region. So, cognizant of your point, Councillor Elgar, right now the language is a growth target, and we're looking to change that to be expressed as a minimum plan density. So the recommendation is that this report and comments from the public with respect to the town-initiated official plan amendment to implement the findings of the downtown Oakville growth area be received. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dodson. Very well done. Questions, Council? Councillor Elger.
It's not a question, actually, it's a comment. That was a beautiful presentation, how you showed the stories, where they were and where they're going, and where the bonusing may be allowed, where the numbers popped up. I thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
I thank you for the letting me know that we won't see those two words together again. Thanks.
Councillor Hutchins.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Along 16 Mile Creek, access to the areas for the public is very limited. Because most of the land which is accessible is leased to various private organizations. I was wondering, since Midtown and things is also going to bring a lot of population, hopefully, at some stage, is there any way or any concept of the town looking at trying to create some sort of path along 16 Mile Creek, either on the Ward 1, Ward 2 side rather than or Ward 3 side?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not aware, but the current designation of natural area and waterfront open space would permit trails.
Okay, thank you. The other thing I'd like to, where the fire hall is currently located, could bonusing be contemplated at that particular area? I noticed that it wasn't crosshatched like some of the other areas.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. We did not contemplate bonusing for that site. Through the work we completed and the public feedback we received, 3D test sites, it was our opinion that the 12 stories was appropriate as a height maximum for that area, but we will take note of your comment.
The only other question I had is the urban, the river, I forget what the designation is only affecting public lands and not private lands, but the town happens to own the fire hall lands, so it is, I suppose, technically public lands. What effect does that have?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the extent of the Urban River Valley overlay just goes to the limit of where the developable area of that site would be, so there wouldn't be any issues from that perspective. No, if you see here, where the cursor is, there's just a slight overlay, but it doesn't actually extend all the way onto that property.
I understand we have registered delegations.
We have one registered delegation, Nick Borkus, Chair of the Downtown BIA.
Mr. Barikas, the chair of the Downtown BIA. Welcome. And thank you for your letter, which council has had.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. First, I'd like to start off by saying that the Downtown BIA fully supports what the staff has prepared, and we'd like to thank you for the good work. However, we were much like Bronte, just to back up a little bit, much like Bronte, we have similar issues. However, our most acute issue on the business forefront is the lack of traffic between Monday and Friday, between the hours of 9 and 5. And one of the suggestions that we'd like to put forward is if a feasibility study could be conducted to review the sites that have been selected for higher density to see if we could turn those into commercial space. Because our rationale behind that is the thinking is that commercial space occupies on a square footage per approximately 300 to 400 percent more occupants. And that would help us with our daytime traffic issues.
I see their pencils flying. It's noted.
Does anyone have any questions regarding the letter?
It's a model of clarity. I wasn't expecting any questions.
Okay, then, thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public with information for council on this file? Yes, ma'am. Please come down, introduce yourself, and share your information with council.
Hi, my name is Lydia Coop, and I've moved into my husband and I moved into the downtown Oakville area 2 years ago and absolutely love it. And one of the reasons I came here is because I didn't want to see all the things I love about a change. And actually, I'm quite impressed with the plans that you've come up with. I think that they'll keep the things that we love about downtown Oakville and change the things that can be changed. Further to Mr. Hutchins' comments over and over again, the only thing that I find a little disconcerting about downtown Oakville, and I understand it's because it's an old place and developed in its own way and pace, it wasn't a planned community, is I'm a walker and a cycler, and I just can't cycle in particular in downtown Oakville. Pretty much if I want to do any serious cycling, and not be on a busy road, I have to put my bike on my car and go somewhere. And Oakville is filled with fabulous paths, and I've been exploring them and enjoying them. And the one along 16 Mile Creek, what I was hoping would come out of these comments, since a lot of that land is leased, and the fire hall is there, that the council would, in future, as these leases come up, make it a stipulation for the canoe club and places like that, that they have to have public access along the river. That's my comment.
We're actually doing that.
Perfect.
And with I might say, the logically expectable result from those seeking to renew the leases. But, you know, at the end of the day, council owns the lands, or the town owns the land, so. But anyway, council's alive to that issue and working hard on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing information. I'll confine it to table and look to the ward for a motion. Councillor Hutchins moves receipt of the information. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Ms. Dodds, very much. Before we turn to the next item, in defense of staff, I want to try to help my colleague on growth targets. The report refers to, you know, you're unhappy about the report using the phrase growth target. That's a section of the report that tries to explain that we're going to go through Livable Oakville, the official plan, and remove from it the words growth target, which appears in Livable Oakville countless times. So, you know, on the downtown, on the Kerr. So, I mean, if you do I did a search for growth target in Livable Oakville, and, you know, and the machine went tilt. So there's dozens. And so they probably felt a little odd because they were doing this partly because of the issue we've made of it. So, and I thank Carly for being able to put it that clearly for us.
She's on it.
Yes. All right, so, Mr. Simeone.
Your Worship, to members of council, as is tradition, we normally introduce staff who have not presented to council before. We have Kate Mihailovich, who's normally associated with our Committee of Adjustment. You might have seen her there or know of her work, but I thought I'd take the time to make sure you knew who she was. Thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to your presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of council for having me this evening. The presentation before you today will provide an overview of the planning applications that have been submitted on behalf of the town to enable the redevelopment of the former Brantwood Public School property, which is also known as 221 Allen Street. The report can be found on pages 323 to 342 of tonight's agenda. The property is located in Ward 3, near the intersection of Palmer Avenue and Allen Street, and also has frontage on Douglas Avenue at the rear of the site. It is approximately 0.9 hectares in size, and the front portion of the school is designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act as the Trafalgar Road Heritage Conservation District. The school opened in 1920. It was operated as a school for 90 years and was expanded a number of times before it was closed in June 2010. The town purchased the property in April of 2012 to have greater certainty over the determination of the potential future land uses for the property. Options for the future use of the Brantwood Public School were undertaken and evaluated through the South Central Public Land Study, which included an extensive public consultation process. In April of 2013, at the conclusion of this study, Council endorsed the recommended land use option, which is shown here, which would provide for 7 new lots for detached dwellings that front onto Douglas Avenue, a block containing the oldest portion of the existing school building to be converted into 4 to 9 residential units, which would have frontage on Allen Street, and a relocated playground area at the corner of Douglas and Palmer. Council directed staff to proceed with the necessary implementation steps, and as such, staff initiated an official plan and zoning bylaw amendments described in the report, which are currently being reviewed. Notice of tonight's public meeting was provided in a newspaper ad, as well as by mail to property owners within 120 meters of the site. To date, I believe there have been 4 comments received or 5 comments received, and none of which appear to be a whole objection to the proposal. Further, in connection with the former hospital site, an open house was held on September 28th. To review the proposed official plan amendments, the property is currently designated as low-density residential on Schedule G of the Southeast Land Use Map of the Livable Oakville Plan. The proposed official plan amendment would maintain the low-density residential designation on the portion of the site adjacent to Douglas Avenue for the future detached dwelling lots. It proposes to apply the parks and open space designation to a portion of the lands to be retained by the town for the relocated playground, and apply the medium-density residential designation to the portion of the site adjacent to Allen Street where the oldest and front portion of the school will be retained and converted to apartment units. With respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendments, the property is currently zoned CU, community use, within the zoning bylaw 2014-014. The proposed zoning bylaw amendment would apply 3 different zoning categories specific to each land use. The special provisions are also proposed for the residential portions of the site to recognize the location of the existing school and to reflect the streetscape character of Douglas Avenue for the proposed 7 detached dwelling units. A playground will not be required any special provisions and will be zoned O1, which is the park zone. In the proposed zoning regulations, special provisions are required to enable the council-endorsed redevelopment option and to reflect the character of the surrounding neighborhood. The area to the north, east, and south of the site are within the RL3-0 zone, which is also subject to Special Provision 10. These zoning regulations apply to the majority of the Brantwood survey, which extends as far north as Cornwall Road, as far south to Lakeshore Road East, west to Allen Street, and east to Gloucester Avenue. Special Provision 10 includes regulations that were introduced under the former zoning bylaw. For the new lots on Douglas Avenue, the proposed amendment seeks to apply a modified RL3-0 zoning based on Special Provision 10 to better reflect the development concept as well as ensure new development is reflected of the character within the neighborhood. A comparison of these zones are reflected in the table. For the school conversion, the special provision required for the RM4 zone is intended to address the setbacks as they exist today for the existing school building and to regulate the number of units that are intended to be contained within the former school. In conclusion tonight, the recommendation before you this evening is the comments from the public regarding the proposed amendments be received. Thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Let's see if there are any. Perhaps we'll go to delegations then. Councillor Hutchins?
Yeah, I had one very small one, I think. Bradwood School is a heritage site, as I take it. Obviously, we want to encourage that, but what happens if there isn't any takers? In other words, people decide that they can't build within that. What will happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, part of the work that we had done in getting to this stage was to look at the marketability, the feasibility, the constructability of being able to convert that building into residential units. The reports that we got back from those studies showed that there is a market and it is feasible to convert those heritage buildings. So we had proceeded with the disposition process and actually had gone out to gone out to the market to determine whether or not someone was interested in that proposal, and we have received bids on it. So we know from a study perspective, and we know from going out to the market, that it is feasible to be able to convert those heritage buildings, the heritage school.
Councillor Chisholm?
Ms. Closey, that's kind of triggered, I hate to say this, but I attended that school in 1965, so it's a long time. I'm part of the heritage. It's so derelict, yes. With respect to the building itself, are we just maintaining the facade, or is there internal parts or structure in that building that we're maintaining? Maybe that's a technical question that I might be jumping ahead here, but yeah.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, in terms of the work that was done, it looked at mostly the facade of the building. So the interior was really not addressed, and I don't believe as part of the, because it's identified under Section 5, which is the district area. So it would be the exterior of the building that we'd be looking at protecting.
Well, that's good, because I carved my initials in one of the walls.
We'll never tell. Is the old principal gone? You're safe. Now the next thing is the old principal will be in the audience ready to give you heck. Madam Clerk, would you call the first delegation?
First delegation is David Mallon, Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association. Oh.
Ms. Purcell, thank you for, you're subbing for Mr. Mallon, right?
I think so. He's not expecting.
Thank you very much. Welcome. And if you'll either move the microphone or yourself, but yeah, that'll help the public hear you as well.
Okay. I sent in a slideshow to help with this, which I'm relieved that I did. Oh, hi,
Help
Kathy.
is on the way.
Thanks.
Right behind you. Chris is a marvel of help.
Good.
Never stumped yet.
All right, and which one is yours?
Well, I have to admit, I have not got my glasses with me, but that looks like my name.
Denise, sorry. Yes.
Which is why I need this, because now you need to read it, because I can't read my notes because I left my glasses at the office. So. Yes,
They're telescopic ones.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Oh, wow.
So,
Excuse now, but they won't stay on.
so all you have to do is just hit the next.
That one?
Here, so
Okay.
hit this one right here, okay?
Just to the next.
Yeah,
next
and when
button.
you're ready for the next slide, you just hit it, okay?
Okay, right. Oh, I can read it from there then. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors and staff for welcoming me this evening. As you know, we've talked many times about Brantwood. I have submitted everything to you, but I'm going to try and work my way through this, despite my seeing difficulties this evening. So, Chartwell Residents Association is asking that Council take a breath and think before they make any further decisions. We do believe that there may be other options available. We want you to investigate alternate options rather than rezoning and rather than selling parkland for the development of 7 residential lots on the Brantwood site. The building itself I'm not addressing this evening, it's just the parkland, the field behind. So this is an overhead of the full site as it stands at the moment. You know, nice lush grass there. And where I've put the yellow line is what will be left as a space for people to play. And I think once you see it like that, you realise why we're not too happy losing so much more. It's about 1/10 of what we had before. I think it's going to take quite the magician to move that play frame into that allotted space. Once it is moved, if it's turned sideways, there will be no room for grass at all there. So although 5 years have passed since the South Central Public Land Study, and although the findings were accepted by council at the time, many of us in the community were not happy, and the majority vote was none of the above to the options that were presented. The TCRA believes it would be a mistake to proceed with the rezoning and repurposing of the land as contemplated, without taking into consideration changes in demographics, the property market, and an increasing awareness of the importance of green space. And if I can just mention the demographics, if anybody lives in this neighbourhood, you'll see huge change. Most people were greyer than me when I moved there 12 years ago, and now I'm one of the old ones with lots of young children in the neighbourhoods. Property market, I don't have to mention to you, but I looked at the report again from 2013. 3.3 million to 4 million is what was expected as a profit from the land. I think we can get that with an awful lot less than selling 7 lots and Brantwood School building. And of course, we've talked a few times this evening about the importance of green space. I don't need to exaggerate that, but I will. So this is a map of the whole of Oakville showing the green space. It's from the town website. And I've zoned in to look at the green space in Brantwood area. And you think there's quite a bit there, but the majority of that green space is completely inaccessible, either on the creek, where it's rather too steep to even walk, and the piece at the top left is actually alongside the train tracks. So I don't know about how much you love your kids, but we don't let our kids play in either of those areas. When I take away those, this is what's left. And the tiny green dot in the middle is what Brantwood Playground will then look like. So we think there'll be superior options, which we haven't had the opportunity to explore yet with staff. The board, the TCRA board, has adopted the position that the existing green space of the former Brantwood School grounds, described as 7 lots and a parkette, in the town's development plans, be retained as green space. Brantwood, as I've said to you many times, is a true neighbourhood park. It's used daily by children and adults of all ages. Its loss would have a significant negative impact on the quality of life in the neighbourhood. Again, we think it would be a mistake to make any further decisions regarding Brantwood Park without researching the cultural, recreational and heritage values of the land and the long-term impact on the community. And we request that the town defer any decision on Brantwood zoning while alternative solutions are investigated. And that brings me to the end.
Thank you very much for your information. Questions, Councillor Duddock?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your presentation. And it's interesting, we have the other following closely thereafter, namely the Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital lands and the plan. I'm a little puzzled when you had shown us the green space. Granted, that was what's existing, but we're going to be having this large piece of property that's going to have the community center along with park and that in very close proximity. So I'm sort of struggling with, it sounds like if you don't have the Brantwood, you don't have anything in the area?
I didn't put the new park for the hospital lands on the map because I don't know what size it's going to be yet, and we don't know what its purpose is going to be. I've been at some meetings recently where it's undefined, whether it will be passive space, active space. What we're looking at for is a place where our kids can kick a ball, throw a frisbee. They wouldn't go to the community centre to do that. We think that that area of the hospital lands is for the whole of Oakville. It's not for the small community around. I mean, we've got condo buildings around us as well as residential detached homes. An awful lot of kids in the neighbourhood who need a safe place to play, and the community centre we don't believe is the right place to send them to play.
And just to be perfectly clear, when we were looking at the extensive public consultation that took place prior to this being presented to us, has your association from day one said you wanted this totally to be a park?
To be completely honest, we had a bit of a divide because a lot of us most of us expected there to be far more parkland on the hospital lands. So we accepted a compromise of giving up a little bit more of Brantwood because we thought we were going to get an awful lot more park space on the hospital lands with the community centre. Okay. So, and we were told at the time you had to sell the land to fund the community centre. And at the time, that funding was 3.3 to 4.4 million. Mm-hmm. So a drop in the ocean.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Chisholm? Thank you. Any others? Thanks. Thank you, Ms. Purcell, for the information from TCRA.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Janet Haslett-Theo from Joshua Creek Residents Association.
Welcome, Ms. Haslett-Theo and JCRA. We look forward to your information.
So, Mayor Burton, councillors, I am here tonight on behalf of Joshua Creek Residents Association. And in regards to Brantwood, as you know, the community consultation on the community center has commenced. And during that consultation, there's been greater clarity on the park elements that will surround the community center. Appropriately, there's been some discussion and we've been encouraged to consider the surrounding parks and those amenities and how they best work together to provide passive and active parks for the area. The actual formal parks consultation is yet to be done, but they've planted that seed as part of the community center discussions. The Brantwood Park and development has not been a focus of discussion on the hospital lands for several years. Yes, it was an active part of South Central, but a real focus on Brantwood has not been a large part of what we've been advocating on when we focused on the hospital lands. And in fact, a few things have changed in the last couple of years. We have greater clarity on the park size for the hospital. It's 0.58. And we know that the value of the lots is multiple times greater than what was projected on Brantwood. And when we stand back as JCRA and we look at the land that is currently set aside for the Brantwood Park, it's apparent that the actual space set aside on Douglas is much too small. By the time the playground is moved over, there's little running room. You just have to stand on the corner and look, and you'll see it is truly a narrow, not a great play space. And yes, we will have some amenities on the community center and outside the community center doors, however it gets developed. But it doesn't change that there's a playground that is going to, play equipment that's going to be moved, and there's really going to be no running space even around it. And surely we can afford to give them more space. So JCRA would support the council direct planning to provide alternative actions for the development of Brantwood that allows for more green space. We've waited this long. We've got time. We might as well do the right thing and focus the discussion now on what we can do to make Brantwood a great neighborhood park, consistent and with what's going to happen on the hospital lands. And I go so far as to say it really should be an integrated strategy. And when we've asked and talked about it before, we really haven't focused on Brantwood. So those are our comments, and I'll answer any questions you might have on Brantwood.
Thank you for bringing your information. I don't see any questions. Thank you. Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is George Niblock, Oakville Lakeside Residents Association.
Welcome, Mr. Niblock. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. So I'm here just briefly to support what TCRA and JCRA have had to say on the issue of the Brantwood green space and parkland. So we would request that council direct staff to investigate alternatives to the elimination of parkland and green space to allow for the development of 7 residential lots. OLRA is unanimous, our board is unanimous, that existing green space on the former Brantwood school grounds as proposed as 7 residential lots and parkette in the town's development plan be retained as green space. As Denise referred to, the demographics, land values, and environmental concerns have changed significantly in the last 5 years since the South Central Public Land Study. As staff is now in receipt of the results of a request for proposal, we believe there should be a reassessment of the proposed land use in conjunction with the review of potential revenue that is achievable from the sale of the school portion of the property. OLRA believes that there are possible outcomes that see more parkland retained while still achieving the town's financial requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the information. Councillor Chisholm.
Mr. Niblock, are you suggesting support of taking all 7 building lots out and leaving the green space?
So what we passed as a resolution was that we don't believe the town should be eliminating green space whatsoever. And, you know, while that was a school site, it's being used as parkland the rest of the time. And it seems like the wrong direction to be headed, to be eliminating parkland, period. I think, you know, this is why we're asking for a review. We don't know what the finances are exactly. We don't know how much revenue is needed, how much can be generated off just selling the school, how much those lots are worth. So, you know, that's why we're thinking another look should be taken closely at those financial gains and requirements and see whether there is a possibility to retain as much, if not all, of that land as parkland.
I'm looking at the map, and it's hard to scale, but I know the property quite well. And with respect to the the playground area, it would seem it's like a postage stamp. Is there any consideration from the associations for maybe some compromise?
I think we're looking for more information at this point, to be honest. I don't think we have enough information to make that determination.
Thank you.
It could be a possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Niblock.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The last listed delegation is Eric Bemmerman.
You're the gentleman who was helpful to the lady with glasses. Thank you on the community's behalf.
With increasing age, these seem to be more and more necessary.
She thought they were very strong, I think.
Apparently. My kids tell me the font on my iPhone is large, so, but I don't have a BlackBerry. So.
Well, we're looking forward to your information.
Thank you. Don't start the clock quite yet. Okay. Your Worship, council members, thank you for giving me the time to address you this evening. I have to admit, and I've been here before, I'm a resident of 184 Douglas Avenue, just 4 doors down from Brantwood on the.
Would you do me a favor?
Yeah.
Either move it or
There you go.
yourself.
Okay.
So
Well,
that the folks at home and the folks in the audience and I can hear you.
Okay. I'm a resident at 184 Douglas, at just 4 doors down from Brantwood, and have 3 kids that all attend at Brantwood, now 13, 15, and 17. So for me, in some sense, we're sort of through perhaps the kids using the playground as much as they once did. But this is for me, I think, as a resident of the neighborhood, quite emotional. And if my wife was here, she's traveling right now. She's a physician engaged in public service in Oakville. If she was here, she'd be quite emotional about it, because when I look at that space, and we could put some of the slides back up on the screen, to me, some things are just wrong. And the council members here, when I look at the weighty matters that you have to address as a council tonight, Bronte, downtown improvement, what's happening to retail, those are complicated issues. Density, size of buildings, how do you attract business, how do you create a viable economy, how do we stop having a bunch of empty storefronts in Oakville, how do we do that? That's complex stuff. This, in my mind, is very easy. I don't know when a town got into the business of land banking and schools got into the business of land banking. Glen Abbey, I get. I can explain to my kids, I can explain to my wife. It's in private hands, and there's only so much that, the town, the province, the federal government can do about it. But how do you explain to the kids in our neighborhood, not just my kids, but the kids that have, Councillor Chisholm went through that school, many others that live in the neighborhood, how do you explain to them that we take green space, open space, a soccer field, not where the Oakville Soccer Club plays with thousands of kids, but this is just where kids go out and play, not organized. They might put soccer, they might just use the old goalposts that are there, they use the old basketball nets at the school, and I won't speak to the school specifically right now. But how do you explain to kids, you just take green space, open space. I think when I bought my house in 1999, I think the plan of subdivision goes back to 1906. The staff presented when the school was built in the 20s. So that space has been there round about 100 years. And we, in 2017, are going to come along and say there was a school closure study, and its wisdom was to close the school. And that was part of that process, and that was part of the TCRA. And let me just divert to that for a moment as a segue. Back then, we were told there'd be no kids in the neighborhood. And if we would have, as a community, not engaged in advocacy, we would have lost New Central as well, in addition to Brantwood. So we got New Central, but there weren't going to be any kids. We have at New Central portables, or at least one portable, maybe there's 2 by now. They were going to bus kids to Chisholm, to Clearview, all kinds of ideas like that. And the government, the Ontario government, has really expensive studies about where kids are going to be and they aren't going to be. If you haven't been down at what I'll call Brantwood Park for a moment in the last few years, go down on a Thursday afternoon, a Saturday afternoon, and see, kids, parents, people with dogs. I think the increasingly more diverse community we're privileged to start to gain in Oakville using that park. So we're going to come along, and because of a school closure, turn around in 2017, again, a school closure that was done in its wisdom on reports, and I'm not questioning the outcome of that at this point, but we're going to come around in 2017 and say, again, because it now makes sense to sell off that land. So in essence, a school, and was open space and public lands, which the community, the taxpayers have paid over manyfold over many years, that suddenly becomes land banking for the town of Oakville. And in 2012, we thought it's worth $3 or $4 million. In 2017, it's worth probably $1 million a lot. It's worth $7 million. Maybe in 20 years, we'll think we sold it cheaply. But to me, when we start engaging in selling off public lands in the midst of an established community, something seems to me to be wrong about what we're doing here. And that's where, to me, I might be a little bit emotional about this tonight, but I'm struggling to find the reason in this. I get that a school was closed. I get that buildings become obsolete. And I won't speak to the, the wisdom of how Brantwood should be redesigned or not redesigned. I look up to the old OT site that sat there for, as long as I've been in Oakville, which is since 1999. The hospital lands need to be redeveloped. Brantwood Public School, the building needs to be redeveloped. We've got other examples, the Shedden Medical Center, that's been redeveloped. The old post office, that needs to be, there's all kinds of things that need to be redeveloped. But if you look at that map, does it make sense to take green space, a soccer field, and a playground and put residences on it at this stage in a subdivision that was created in 1906, where a school sits since the 1920s? Again, I'm not, I'm a lawyer by trade, but I'm not the people that have spoken before me, I think have ably presented what needs to be presented in terms of what council should be encouraged to do. But as a resident, as a father, as a member of the community, I'm just taking a step back and going, I really don't understand this. So I think as you all look at this issue, to me, the weighty matters before you are the ones that were presented beforehand this evening. How to redevelop the hospital site, that's a weighty matter. But taking a soccer field and a playground and turning that into a bunch of residential lots to make profit, to reinvest into what? And this is sort of where the tax-paying, perhaps, community member comes out and says, okay, where's that money going? How is that being reinvested? So, and those are issues I don't want to speak to this evening because they're much more complex. To me, it's a very, very simple issue.
Your association knows where the money's going, and you said you're on the board of your association.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I once was.
Well, are you familiar with the plans for the community center on the old hospital site?
Generally, yes. But I'm also familiar with the smallness, as I'll call it, of the
I'm just saying,
the green
everything's
space.
connected here. And, if you're really curious about why council bought the land when the school board was selling it, you may not have heard Kate explain that council bought it in order to control what would happen to it, because if we hadn't, the school board would have sold it to a developer and we would have had a fight at the OMB, which would have enriched one of your colleagues somewhere in the bar. So, it's a complicated little thing, and I was concerned that you're missing a couple of pieces, a couple of steps in the story. Are you aware that council bought the Queen Elizabeth Park High School when the board closed that for the same purpose, to control what would happen to it, and sold off, I think it was 25 lots in order to recover the cost of buying it?
In vague terms, but let me ask you then, what did we pay for the land? What did we pay for the land?
I'm not aware.
Okay.
But as the community came together to argue for and persuade council to build a community center, council had to have a way to come up with a faint hope, at least, of being able to cover the costs of it. And so there's been quite a process, starting with the South Central Land Study and coming forward all these years to this point. So this is being heard by council as a request to sort of change the deal and look for a different way to finance the project. And we're here to receive those suggestions, and we will go away and consider other ways to do it. But I hope I've helped you understand how come there's a land bank. And I still believe in that as a town reaction to the school board selling off public land, even though the irony is that the taxpayer buys it twice.
Right. I couldn't agree more.
We appreciate the full irony of it. But we got into this because in Queen Elizabeth Park High School, we had built the pool and some other facilities on that school, and we were in the position where we were going to lose those town assets because the school board owned them. So we now have a nice pool, and we still have the gyms, and we have a lovely facility. But that's the kind of thinking that led to that decision, this decision, and others. And in other cases, council has made a decision not to buy a school that's been rendered, it's been closed by the board. And so it isn't something that we're able to do every time. So I think council believes that it did your neighborhood a good turn when it bought the school. And now we will go away and consider what to do, and for as long as I've been here, council's been very good about listening to what people say. And we don't do everything we're told, but we listen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's not. I'm not here to malign anybody, neither planning staff nor council nor the mayor.
Give me a second. I hate to be discourteous, but you won't be able to do anything unless I get a motion to go past 10 o'clock. Councillor Lischina, all those in favor? And I need hands. I have to count your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It carries barely. Now you can malign or praise whatever you had in mind.
No, and there have been discussions, with members of before me here today in the past, and I think the type of forward thinking that got us to where we are today is to be commended, and not every community can perhaps engage in that, and I support that fully. But again, times change, and I think what the TCRA is suggesting, and others after them have suggested, is that maybe it's worth another look. And if good money was spent to acquire those lands, then and they were acquired for a certain price, that means that perhaps today that land is more valuable, and maybe there's other options. Again, I haven't done the work and wouldn't want to speak here today about how it should be precisely redone. But to me, just from a common sense point of view, I think if the one slide that was up there that shows the size of the playground that was created, we're now basically going to take that and rotate it into, I think the term stamp size was used earlier, parquet, I heard that before, piece of property. And to me, that is the hard part. Apart from all the things we're discussing, that's the hard part to justify to the community in my mind. So I think we need a solution around that. Whether that means there are less lots that are sold, I won't speak to precisely, but to me, taking it from where we are today down to what's proposed, it just doesn't make sense, even considering the other things that you put forth earlier.
We thank you for the representation of the idea, and I believe we've heard it very well. I'll tell you that council tries very hard to be responsive to the communities that make up Oakville, and we do try to be fair to the taxpayer at large as well. And in between the horns, that describes the horns of the dilemma, and we'll go away and see what we can do about it.
Thank you for your consideration, and I'll end with saying, when it's gone, it's gone. So we can't get it back, and so I hope that you'll consider that when you make the decision when it comes before you. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for coming. Are there other members of the public with information for council on this file? This is a motion to receive, not to take a decision. All right, I'll confine it to table. Councillor Hutchins?
Move the motion.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Now, we arrive at the hospital. And if you give your attention to Gabe Charles, he will summarize the proposal before us. And this is, once again, a information for receipt item. Mr. Charles, we are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. This is a public meeting for town-initiated amendments, official plan and zoning for the former hospital site, the Oakville Trafalgar Memorial Hospital site. As council has heard and discussed this evening, there is a fairly lengthy history to where we are with this particular site, starting with the 2013 South Central study. And through May of 2017, staff had come back to council with a variety of options. There were 3 in total, based on some principles that had been created through the town's official plan, as well as good planning practice. And those 3 options were then presented to the community via a workshop on the 1st of June, as well as there was a lot of comment that had come through the town's website. So at the end of June, we had brought forward a master plan for council's consideration based on all those comments, which council then subsequently endorsed. And that master plan is this one in front of you, which incorporates the new community center, roughly 45,000 square foot floor plate or so, identified in the blue, the maintenance of the existing parking garage, as well as the designated high school, Oakville Trafalgar High School. We had also identified the park just to the north of the community center, which is about 1.5 acres in this concept, as well as low-density residential lots along the south side of McDonald and the west side of Allen Street. And internal to the site is a new road, 17-meter wide road, public street, with medium-density residential facing onto that street. In addition to that, we had identified the prospect of seniors-oriented housing south of the parking garage, which was based on a fair amount of comment that had been received through the consultation, looking for opportunities for residents to age in place in this area. For a little bit more detail in terms of how that gets translated to from a lotting perspective, there are 12 lots on the south side of McDonald, as well as 9 on the west side of Allen. The idea with these particular lots is to be similar in size to those that are in the immediate area to the north and to the east. The depth of the lots is a little bit larger than some of the ones around, but the width of the new single detached lots is relatively complementary to that. So there was a total of 19 singles and 16 towns in the area for a total of 35 new residential units is what we're looking at. So in order to facilitate the development of that over the entire site, there are some changes to the official plan and the zoning that we're looking at. The property is currently designated for institutional, which is reflective of the hospital use that was there beforehand, as well as the Wyndham Manor. And what we're looking at doing now would be to redesignate the low density to that which is similar to the north and east as low density residential, as well as a medium density residential internal to the public, or along the public street, internal to the site. Where the community center and park would be, that would be designated as parks and open space. And south of that is the seniors oriented area that we're mentioning, which would be a medium density designation. So that would have a 30 to 50 units per hectare. We are proposing some site specific policies which would be reflective of a 4-story maximum height, as well as the integration of the high school as a heritage resource, as well as public space in front of the high school. And what we'd mentioned about that is that could take a variety of forms, be it more passive, more active, as an urban square, or as something similar. In addition, from a zoning perspective, is rezoning the overall site from institutional to the residential uses as well as community use, which would facilitate the park as well as the community center itself. And as Ms. Mihalich was mentioning, the area to the north and east is an RL30 special provision 10 zone. So what we were looking to do was to use something fairly similar for the low density res on McDonald and Allen Street, and an RM1 zoning for the townhouse, as well as an RM4 for the Wyndham Manor. The reason the institutional, the I has remained, is the expectation is when that site redevelops, which is where the existing high school and the parking lot is located currently, when that redevelops, our expectation would be that would go through a full rezoning process, which would go through the public process, be brought back to council. So at that time, we would be changing the zoning for that specific area from I to something which would be tailored more towards whatever that development proposal might be. And so as Kate had gone through the provisions that we were looking at, in terms of the minimum frontage, and this is specific to the low density single detached lots, a minimum frontage, as well as a maximum lot coverage, a minimum amount of landscaping, as well as to ensure that we're maintaining and certainly complementing the character in the area, is being more restrictive on the size of garage doors. So there's a number of things that we are still working through right now, which are ongoing studies for transportation and servicing, as well as getting comments from our partner agencies and departments. Next steps are that we would be looking to finalize those reports, bringing that forward to council for consideration with the recommendation on the overall site, as well as hopefully by that time be able to provide some update in terms of the disposition of the future lands. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Charles. Questions? Councillor Elgar?
Through you, Mayor Burton. With regard to the park, I heard you say it was about 1.5 acres. So an acre is like 200 by 200, so you're talking like 300 by 200, I guess, or something like that. Do you have the actual rough dimensions of the park for the room there would be for children to play? Like I'm thinking of a game of pickup, whether it be football, baseball, or something like that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the detail for the park design has not yet been done. There is a consultation process which will be undertaken through our Parks Department. In terms of the dimensions, the overall width of the park size is around 82 meters and the length about 65, 66 meters. So that puts us at about 0.58, 0.6 of a hectare.
Of a hectare, yeah. Now the park at the south part there, is that part of a park also, or what is going to be there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, for clarification.
The southeast side, yes, that's it.
The space to the east of the Wyndham Manor, we have extended the medium density designation, or proposing to extend that all the way south. There are restrictions on that site. There are easements as well as servicing, which bisects that part of the property several times for fire access as utilities, as I was trying to say, which is in favor of the Wyndham Manor facility. There's very limited amount that can be developed on that particular site.
That can be developed?
Very limited, so in other words, pretty much nothing.
So that would be a playground also?
Through Mr. Mayor, that could be used. There hasn't been any discussion about programming the space, though.
Okay, but so you're talking on the north, that section there, even though it's not planned yet, you've got roughly 1.5 acres up there, correct? And then the south, okay. I thank you for that.
Councillor Hutchins?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. On the 29 units per hectare that on the overall density we're talking about, what effect will be the seniors-oriented housing have on that density? Would you, I mean, we don't know yet exactly what's going to be there, but if there is a seniors housing with, I don't know, wings, I mean, I'm looking at Northridge and things, where they got maybe 5 houses and 40 people at each thing. I mean, what sort of are we anticipating here?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the area identified in the pink, brown colored south of the parking garage is about 0.7 of a hectare. In designating this area for medium density, our permissions are 30 to 50 units per hectare. So if 70% of 50 would give you the number of units that could be independent type units. Again, because we don't have a partner or a provider for the seniors piece, the development could, should it go forward, take a variety of different forms. It could be more assisted living, it could be more independent living. So that's why we've looked to tailor the site-specific policy to facilitate that development, but also ensure that there's a cap in terms of the amount of density.
Okay, so about the old OT, I was, as you know, in conversations with a lot of the resident associations, and I was a little bit surprised to find that the civic space and the old high school could potentially be sold off and the civic space area potentially developed. Is that still being considered, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what has been identified through council's endorsed master plan is the preservation of the high school. We've also made it clear that there should be a civic space of some sort in front of the school. That is for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the heritage significance of the resource really does speak to the views that go towards the school. So it does make sense to keep an open area in front of that, much more so than a parking lot. The manner in which that can be delivered remains open. Ultimately, the hope is that the space of the school would be integrated in some sort of redevelopment of the overall site for a senior's purpose. Therefore, the space in front of the school could take any number of different, it could be designed differently. And so that has been reflected in the policies that we have suggested to council. That could be more passive, it could be more of a square, but our suggestion is that that remain publicly accessible in that area.
Okay, so we would ensure that it be publicly accessible, whatever the concept is, you're saying. Fair enough, thank you.
Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Charles, I'm going to take you outside the realms of this site here, south of Shedden. Is Wallace Park still there as a park? And what's the approximate size of Wallace Park? An acre, half acre?
Through Mr. Mayor, I could look that up if you like.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot because I'm going back to the Brantwood site and looking at this site, and right in the middle here is Wallace Park. And I'm not sure, and please excuse, I haven't been in that area that often, is there still a baseball diamond there? Okay. So the question has to be asked is, if we're looking at this as integrated through the process, can we not consider, when we're looking at Brantwood and this site, also include Wallace Park, the park? Or has that already been considered, or am I missing the point here?
Through Mr.
Mayor,
we would be, as part of the evaluation of this site as well as Brentwood, we'd be looking at all of the park space in that area. So that would also include Georgia Square, for example. There are a number of spaces there. We can certainly have further discussions with our park staff for further evaluation of that.
I think there's some synergies here with respect to Wallace and Brantwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Charles. Madam Clerk, would you call the delegations?
Our first delegation is David Mallon from TCRA.
I think I'm pretending to be David Mallon.
Welcome. He's a very flexible man tonight.
Indeed he is. I'm Paul Ambrose, and I'm speaking for the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association and for Oakville Lakeside Residents Association. Broadly, TCRA and OCRA enthusiastically support the plans for the hospital lands and the relevant necessary amendments to livable Oakville and the zoning bylaws. The residential development, the new community centre and park, retention of the parking garage, and repurposing of the old high school and its remaining land. We congratulate staff on having conducted an excellent public consultation process. However, we have only just learned that staff is considering the possibility of seeking proposals from private developers for the old high school and its lands, and we are alarmed. We think this means selling the land in front of the old building, which we had understood was to be a civic square. It feels like a major change to the plan. However, we do not yet understand well enough what is envisaged. We have not had time to think through the implications. We have not had time to consult our neighborhood. We urge council to give us enough time to do these things, and notwithstanding Mr. Charles' remarks.
Well, instead of giving you time, how about I just give you a really clear answer and relieve the suspense?
We would welcome it.
The civic square, civic space in front of the hospital will be public no matter what we do around how it's developed, and we will use our planning powers to guarantee it. And you can take that to the bank.
Thank you.
I'm actually kind of surprised at the idea ever came up that we would lose control. The whole point of this exercise, since we got the land from the hospital, has been community control.
Of course, it was just the sudden appearance of this new development that
So
took us unawares.
we retain the vision, no private entity would be able to play unless they respected the plan.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but thank you for raising it, because it gives us a chance to clear it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other delegations?
The last delegation is Janet Haslett-Thiel, Joshua Creek Residents Association.
Welcome back. We look forward to your information on this file.
Okay, so I can throw most of this out because most of it's been already spoken to, so bear with me. I won't try not to use the 10 minutes. Thank you for your time, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Once again, I'm here on behalf of Joshua Creek Residents Association. So the hospital land development is moving along well. We've had some good consultation, but as you heard, there's some misunderstandings about that front civic space. We've now heard on the record that the civic space will be protected for public use. Let me add some additional comments, though. What you're hearing is that the community needs certainty. And just as you perhaps go home at night and wonder, what are those developers potentially going to come up with next? So do residents. And we are looking for language that really locks it in, that zones that front civic space, and I'm very pleased to see the picture up there that says civic space, that zones it in livable Oakville as civic space. So there's no, wiggle room here that, somebody might say, well, we'll give up a little bit of it here. Because the concept, and quite frankly, I should acknowledge that the concept came from planning. We were having discussions about the hospital lands and the configuration, and people had a lot of anxiety about how much park was going to be on that land. And when the civic space came along, you just have to look at the picture, and it's pretty evident. Everybody goes, yes, that answers some of the question. We could have some passive space there, or we could have, a memorial to old OT with. There were things that were talked about. When we read the amendments, we're not satisfied that there's that level of clarity. And we think that with the brilliance of our planning staff, because they are very talented, that the wording can be more locked in and it could be zoned in a way to make sure there's certainty for the residents. So that's really why you have people hanging around until this time of night, and we're asking you to hang around because we want you to do that. In terms, I'm just going to turn to a couple other comments. Where you see the space that says open space, and there was talks about easements and hydro, that is not developable to put a playground down. Okay, I'm not a playground expert, but it isn't going to work. So please take that out of the thought of, well, we could just, that's more. It could be, it could have park benches or something, but it's really not developable. That's what we've been told on repeated occasions. So I'm just repeating what I've heard on the record from people in Parks and Rec.
Would you be okay with kids kicking a ball around on it?
Well, so interestingly, it's got this little dip in it. Like it's not a soccer kind of kick the ball around. It really is meant, for a couple of park benches maybe. It's not play space per se, because it is got easements and weird demography, I think they call it.
If kids play on it anyway, will you object?
No, and I think in the spirit of what you've heard from an earlier delegate, sometimes we have to remember, because where you grew up, there was free play. It wasn't always organized, structured play. And the more and more we intensify and pull away and take away that option for free space and free play, wow, that's a sad, sad fact. So that's one more pitch to really think in a more integrated way about the green space, not just on here, but protecting the civic space and then protecting sort of the Brantwood, elements of the Brantwood and Wallace Park. And my last comment would be, when we've been having the community consultation about how the community, what will be in the community center, how it'll be designed, we specifically have asked the question about the civic space, and we're told that's out of scope. And I have to tell you, I think that is totally wrong. It should be in scope. You know, how that integrates with the community center is an important part, and perhaps that consultation should be not with a developer, but with the community at large. What specifically will that civic space be? Because what you think of as a civic space and what we think of as civic space may not be the same. Better to have clarity. Those are my final comments. Any questions?
Thank you very much for your information. Questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Did you say that was the last one? Yes. Are there other members of the public with information for council on this file? Well, you'll have to take turns.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, my name is Jan Driver. I'm a resident on the north side of McDonald Road. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Charles, who spent over probably 45 minutes explaining to me the details of the proposed bylaw amendment. I do still have a couple of reservations that I would like to draw to your attention, and it pertains to the street that is being added as part of the development of the property. Needless to say, it opens onto a part of McDonald Road that used to be quite quiet. Most traffic along that way was heading very excitedly to the maternity ward and leaving very, very slowly about 24 hours later. So to see a road opening onto that area that was quite nice and quiet, and to see that it actually leads to a parking garage that will be probably used by a number of people. So if you look at the road, it does head down and seems to have an access either in or out of the parking garage. For residents who live on that end of the street, we're very concerned that people who don't like to wait in line at stop signs and who don't like to follow the busier street will be cutting through there to access or to depart the garage. So we would like to recommend that a consideration be made so that road would have limited use, either by making it a one-way street, accessing the garage but not leaving the garage, or that it be considered a private entry for the townhouses. That's adding a street that just sort of bottlenecks in one area when there are very, very good access ways on both Allen and Reynolds that have served that property very well in the past.
Okay, thank you for the information.
Thank you.
Mr. Niblock?
Thanks very much. So there's an area of uncertainty a little bit around the old OT site that our board has discussed that I just wanted to raise. One of the reasons for that is that on this plan, the seniors-oriented housing is in a bubble that is located behind the old OT. So it was recent, as Janet mentioned, that we learned that it's in fact the entire site extending over to Reynolds Street that's included in what would go out for proposals for development of that entire site. So in all our discussions dating back, there were suggestions that seniors-oriented housing would be a good use for a portion of that land. We were never clear that the old OT would be included in that. And we would suggest that, in fact, that's probably not the best use for that building for two reasons. One, because it's an old building, retrofitting it for seniors would seem to be more complex of a proposition. And two, I think what may have been learned from the RFP on the Brantwood site is there are less developers interested in that case, there were 7 residential lots, but they had to also renovate an old heritage structure. So not as many people interested in that. so would push the values down. In this scenario, I suspect the same thing would be true, that there would be more interest in the development of the seniors-oriented portion if it can be built new and independent of the school. In the same way that the community center is now being built independently of the school because it's easier. But I think potentially what has been learned from the RFP on the Brantwood site is there is a market for that old OT building for conversion to residential units. And
so, Mr. Niblock?
Yes.
I beg your pardon. In order to allow you to finish, I need to ask council's permission to go past 10:30. Would you hold your thought for a second?
Absolutely.
So I need to pass two motions. I need a motion to waive the procedure bylaw on this question. Let's see if I've got that. Councillor Hutchins moves that. And we need 9 votes to do that. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's failing. Mr. Niblock, I'm going to have to cut you off. You could send those comments in writing.
Certainly. Thank you.
And thank you very much for starting an interesting conversation. I regret that council's too tired to continue. Council, we need a motion to rise and report to council. Councillor Lapworth, all those in favor? No? Oh, I'm sorry. We need a motion to receive. Councillor Hutchins, all in favor? I'm hurrying too fast. That carries. Now we need a motion to rise and report. And Councillor Lapworth again, all in favor, and that carries. I rise and report the Committee of the Whole has met and made recommendations on consent items 1 and 2, public hearing items 3, 4, 5, and 6, discussion items 7, 8, and 9, advisory committee minute items 10 and 11 on October 10th, and public hearing items 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, and the new business item confidential 1 this evening, as noted by the clerk. May I have a mover and seconder for the report? Councillor O'Meara, Councillor Knoll, all in favor? The report is adopted. Council, it's now time for new business. You have 1 second. I will preempt you. I think we ought to extend our congratulations to Councillor Elgar on his birthday today and wish him many happy returns. And now, could I have a mover and a seconder for the bylaws? Councillor Chisholm and Councillor Robinson, all those in favor as published in the agenda, and they are adopted, and that completes our work with a second to spare. Thank you for your time and attention. It's been great working with you, and the meeting is adjourned.